try to learn all that we can at the head of the Wind River while we're here. Clarissa, would you please take roll?
Mr. Chairman, this is for the Joint Travel Committee for June 5th. Senator Boner.
Here.
Senator Hicks.
Excused.
Senator Jones. Senator Schuler. Representative Campbell. Representative Connolly. Representative Harshman.
Excused.
Representative Jarvis.
Here.
Representative Provenza.
Here.
Representative Storer. Representative Thayer.
Here.
Representative Worf.
Excused.
Co-Chairman Byron.
Here.
Chairman Landon.
And I'm here and ready. Committee, I would entertain a motion to adopt the standard rules, and then we can get started.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to adopt the standard interim committee rules.
Okay, I've got a second from Senator Schuler. Discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposed? No? Okay, we will operate under standard rules. I don't know what's going on down at the other end of the table there, but
This is the beginning.
just some housekeeping things real quickly, committee, and then I want to get to our good director who's here to visit with us about state parks and cultural resources. The way I like to operate is that we really don't do absentee voting. And so I want committee members to be here and to hear debate on certain issues. And so generally, I think I speak for the co-chairman that we'll kind of expect folks to be here and we won't be voting absentee in any way. Other than that, most of you have been around the committees that I've been around and we'll do some good work together. Mr. Co-Chairman, how about some comments to get us started?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. No, really excited to be here in Du Bois. Excited about certainly our field trip later today, and great to be at this wonderful site at the museum. And thanks for hosting us.
Okay. Director, take it away. State parks and cultural resources. We've got some good topics on the docket this morning, and this is one of them. So it's good to see you, Dave.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, and good morning, committee. And it's great to see you all. And Chairman Landon, welcome to your home place, home country. My name is Dave Glenn. I'm the Director of State Parks and Cultural Resources. And what I plan to do is give you a brief update, and then we'll move into some of those other topics. I want to start by thanking staff. You know, my wife and I went to an event at the State Museum, about a month ago called Taps and Traps. And it was to learn about the trapping era in Wyoming, the early 1800s. And it was a thing. We bought tickets ahead of time. It sold out. You show up, there was a little winery there. There was a little microbrewery. And there were 50 to 100 adults walking around. It was sold out, learning about the trapping era. You would go from station to station and talk about firearms, talk about what a camp looked like. There were some wild Mustangs outside that folks would talk about. And it was just great to see the excitement of people learning in a fun environment at the State Museum. Additionally, National Recreation Park Association has, we have been nominated for the Gold Medal Award for the state parks and historic sites and trails. This is the top award for state park systems in the country.
Let me, Director, let me stop you on that one. Congratulations. Let's just make sure that we throw that out real quickly.
Thank you.
To our commissioners. Please continue. Yeah.
Thank you. It's actually the second year running that we've been nominated. And it shows that we punch above our weight, I feel. I think our budget is probably one of the smallest in the country. Number of staff we have is smallest in the country. But it shows that we're being recognized for the great work that the staff are doing. And the reason I love this job is seeing the passion of our staff and the passion of people working to improve communities and enrich lives of visitors and residents alike. So moving on, you know, we're right in the throes of finalizing our new strategic plan right now. When I came on board about a year ago, we started working on that. We've been very careful because our previous strategic plan was so good. But times have changed and we wanted to tweak a few things, and we've kind of narrowed it down to 4 pillars. We've talked to every single staff member has had an opportunity to give input. We worked with the governor's office. We've worked with many of you. We've worked with the public as we put this together. And the four pillars start with inspiring, talking about service and engagement, customer service, outreach, transparency, programming, those types of things. The second pillar talks about stewardship. By statute, we are kind of required to do cultural and historic resource management, records management, natural resource management. But part of that is also interpretation and resources and education as well. So that's kind of the stewardship pillar. And then we talk about economic and community impact. And that one I'll talk about a little bit more. You know, it starts with partnerships and collaborations. And I want to stay right now, our agency currently doesn't work in a vacuum. It is a week does not go by that I'm not talking and collaborating and working and partnering with another agency and another director. Just this week, Diane and I have had several calls with the Office of Tourism. Our staff are constantly communicating. It's not just other agencies within the state, it's communities, it's NGOs, it's federal agencies. I see Dan McCoy from the Worth Center here. We're working constantly with those folks. But I think we've got to double down on that, because what's happening in the state, what's happening nationally at the federal levels, we're going to need to double down and really focus on partnerships and collaboration more. Part of that pillar also talks about research and development, community outcomes, and funding opportunities. As you know, we are the federal pass-through of many different funding opportunities. Land and Water Conservation Fund, Recreation Trail Program, National Endowment for the Arts, let alone some of the others that are state-related, such as the Cultural Trust Fund, the New Outdoor Recreation Tourism Trust Fund. We want to make sure that we're working hand in hand with communities. They're achieving what they need, we're achieving our mission, and we're doing what's best for the state. And then the last one, well, and another piece of that too is also economic growth. You know, our agency, just state parks, historic sites, and trails has a $781 million impact to the state. You throw in the cultural resources side, it's over $1 billion. We want to make sure that we're raising that number, that we're increasing that impact and trying to diversify the state's economy. And then the last piece, and it's last but not least, is just focusing on employees. You know, we are committed to recruiting and retaining a cohesive, well-trained, happy, safe workforce. And we're going to do that through well-being, professional development, recognition, and one that's very important to me is internal collaboration and communication on how we move forward. Besides the new strategic plan, we're also initiating a new idea on reinvigorating our volunteer program. Last year, we had just over 20,000 volunteer hours. It was just under 20 full-time employees. I think we have the ability to double that number in the next 3 or 4 years. And part of that is, I think we have been a little discombobulated. We've worked and done our job. Kevin is here from the State Museum. He does a phenomenal job managing the volunteers at the State Museum. State Parks, managing campground hosts and other volunteers, but we're not talking as much as we should. So we're going to work together to figure out how to increase that. And I'm going to use a camp host as an example. We have very few electrical sites. We have very few with water and sewer. If you're driving, volunteering to come out and be a campground host, and you're bringing your 25-foot trailer, and you pull into a campsite, and you have no water, you have no sewer, and you have no electrical, it's really not that open for them to be excited to work for you. So we're going to really work from our construction and engineering department, making sure that we have the facilities for them, but also how do we take care of them? They have a day off. Man, we should be giving them a parks pass so they could go to another park and see what they can do and learn a little bit more and enjoy it, or go work in another park. So that's going to be our focus. We're going to try and make it a thing to work for state parks and cultural resources. You've heard me talk a lot about in the past focusing on efficiencies, and that's another thing we're really doing, and we're doing a great job. We are a lean and mean agency, and we're very proud of that. But I still think there's some fine tuning we can do to be a little bit more efficient. I talked about those granting programs. We have several boards, and those boards do need to be different because the grants are focused differently. But at the same time, we use different software for these granting programs. Is there a way we could combine that to maybe save a few bucks, but also be more efficient? If one of those employees gets hit by a bus, the next employee can hop in and go, I know how to work this program, let's go. Just basic things like that. We're going to be really focusing on that. I'd like to talk to you a little bit.
So Director, before you
Yes, sir.
leave that topic, what exactly you mentioned, is it different? what kind of different platforms do we have out across the state? Different pieces of your state parks group are operating on. I didn't understand that. Can you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman. So when people apply for grants, there's some, Nick is working on those for the 250th right now. It's a relatively simple application. There's a board that quickly reviews it. They check it off. The governor approves it. We make the phone call. Those are relatively simple. When you start working with federal grants, there's so much criteria and so many rules that need to be followed. There's software programs out there that help the grantee apply and do those types of things, but also help the grantors, us, track all of check all of the boxes that need to be checked in order to distribute that money. And there's several different programs out there that people use, and we're using different programs.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Please continue.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about our site criteria process. We've been trying to wrap our heads around this, and I'm going to be having more discussions with you in the future about this. So I kind of want to lay the groundwork. And site criteria essentially is before we are designating or disposing of any state park or historic site by statute, we go through a rules process that's called site criteria. And what that does is it aims to fairly evaluate the potential of a park or historic site. Challenges, opportunities, does it need protection, potential for success. One that's important to me is it ranks criteria to address the site's ability to contribute to rather than burden our system. That's really important because, as you know, we get to eat what we kill within the state park system. It goes to capital construction, operations, and maintenance. If we're taking on a site that's going to be a burden on that and potentially not contribute, there's still value to that potentially, but we need to look at those types of things. Usually begins with the project proponent, the landowner, a county, federal government, a private landowner reaching out to us. Comes to me, I say, yes, let's start the site criteria process. We go through the site criteria process. We look at what's the potential visitation, what's the revenue, what is the resource that needs to be protected, what's the story that needs to be told, and then we rank it from high to low. And usually it's a medium high or a medium low, something like that. Then it comes to me and I say, okay, let's go the next step. That's a gate. Got to go through that gate. Once it comes to me, if I say let's go forward, it goes to our commission. If they approve it, then I come in front of you as the legislature, because by statute, before any new park or historic site is created, it takes an act of legislation to do that. And we're good with that. We think it's a good plan, but my planning department has 3 people in it. And when I talk about being lean and mean, when we are working on those things, the planning department also handles strategic and master planning efforts, federal, state planning, NEPA processes, land ownership files, cultural and environmental compliance, blah, blah, blah. I could go on. So I have 3 staff that do that. And I want to give an example of a recently completed project, that High Plains Research Station at Arboretum. That project came forward, was brought to us by the city of Cheyenne and some legislators saying, would you start the site criteria process? We went through that site criteria process and completed it in 2023. It was 450 staff hours for my agency, a quarter of one person's time for a year to go through that process. It gets to the legislature and dies. And I'm okay with that. I think that is your will. What I'm trying to figure out is there a gate earlier on that we can shut before my people spend 450 hours worth of time? I'm not asking for any action to be taken. I just kind of want to lay that groundwork so we can potentially have some discussions in the future, because I've got a few ideas potentially on how we could move forward with those to just be a little bit more efficient.
Director, thanks for pointing that out. I just want to stop real quickly and make sure that the committee was honed in on that, because I think that is important for us to understand the hidden administrative cost of some of the things that are done and then not receive consideration. That's a little tough. I do have a question. Director, and then I want to get to the committee if they've got anything too, let you finish up, but that I'm trying to, if there's a project, for example, and I'm gonna bring one up here in a little bit, that is probably way too big for our staff to handle. Have we ever had a project that we have set aside resources so that we can get outside consulting help? Is that something that you've ever been a part of, Director?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of our master planning processes we go through, we hire consultants to go through those processes and other things, just because it's such a big lift. We set usually some special revenue, some of that money, that fee revenue aside, so we can legally go through those processes that we legally have to go through. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Committee, anything before we let the director finish up? Go ahead, Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along those lines of using staff resources for something that turns out to be unpopular in the legislature, what would prevent you from waiting until the legislature takes official action before you start the process of taking on a new historic site? Just a little bit more information as to, how you balance that. And, I can remember, say, Quebec one, that being somewhat unique in that there's multiple pieces of legislation that had to pass because of the relationship with the federal government, but certainly that wouldn't count, say, if it's a municipality, for example, in our capital city. Just a little bit more information as to what, your decision-making process as to why you would spend that amount of staff time for something that requires legislative approval before you get the approval.
Mr.
Director
Chairman,
Glenn, go
Senator
ahead.
Boner, thank you for the softball, because that's exactly kind of my idea and thought process is there a process earlier on that says, go ahead and start this process. We are interested in this before we get all the way down there. And I don't know the answer, but I think there is a step somewhere. Maybe it's this committee, maybe it's the legislature as a whole saying we don't like this idea and we can move our resources elsewhere, or we do like this idea, go ahead and move forward. So great question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. That follow up, you okay? Okay, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess a follow-up to that question, even if people don't approach you beforehand, before a bill draft is made, and I'm not on the receiving end of this, but when we do bill drafts, LSO contacts state agencies to figure out what's the fiscal impact going to be of this bill. So there has to be work done beforehand, or you're potentially getting a bill draft in December and staff's having to spend potentially December to allow us to do our jobs in an informed way would be the other concern.
Representative Provenza, good points made. Yeah, I kind of like this conversation a little bit, Director. There might be an opportunity for us to consider committee, maybe even a bill that might clean something up or include this committee in the process of being helpful before we get too far down the track. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Please continue, Director, and I'll let you finish up your comments, and maybe we'll have another question or two.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the reason I'm bringing this up on the site criteria is as we are seeing city budgets and county budgets dropping a little bit, we are starting to see an influx of requests right now. And I have a feeling that we're going to see more and more of those coming on. So I kind of see the train coming down the track, and it's like, okay, how do we figure this out before the train hits us? So thank you for the discussion on that. I mentioned before that we're a lean and mean agency, and I just wanted to throw this example out. Nick Nalen, Deputy Director, he's on the National Association of State Park Directors board, and he was down in Texas at their second largest park, Garner State Park. They have 487,000 visitors at this park. That's less than what we have at Kurt Gowdy, and less than what we have at Glendo State Park. 487,000. Glendo's 489. Gowdy is 545,000. They have 28 employees that work at that park, full-time employees. Our agency at each park has 5 full-time employees. It shows that we punch above our weight. We're proud of that. We are lean, we are mean. But you know, when you hear these discussions about Doge and other things, I look at that and go, wow, I'm not sure what else we can do. You know, we've had 32 less employees since 2010. Our general fund budget is less than 2010. 18% less employees since 2010. And yet here we are managing 500,000 people. Glendale, which on a busy weekend in the 4th of July is the 4th largest city in the state with 5 full-time employees. I also want to thank Representative Connolly for coming out to the ribbon cutting at Fort Phil Kearny a couple of weeks ago. We worked with a foundation, the Helmsley, Charitable Trust, and received a $1.1 million donation from them to build a new interpretive center. And our district range manager out there talks about how the landscape tells the story about Fort Phil Kearny. And this new visitor center / interpretive center just looks out over the mountains and looks out over the fort and part of where those battles happen. And it really does tell the story. And thank you for coming. It was great to see you there. And I love your sister. She's awesome. And we're doubling down working with the Helmsley Charitable Trust as well. We've had them out the last couple of weeks looking at some other visitor centers and some other potentials in the future. So hopefully I'll be here in front of you maybe in October or November with some good news for some potential other project funding. Quick update on the Outdoor Recreation Tourism Trust Fund Board. The board, as you know, has been created and confirmed by the Senate. They just held their second meeting last month. They came out with a draft set of rules that is going out to the public here very quickly. And the whole idea is to get the grant applications by the end of the year, with the idea of reviewing those and getting that money to the ground as soon as it's available, July 1st, 2026. So as many of you know, Jeremiah Ryman, he is the chair of the board, and he has been phenomenal. It's a very diverse board, represents a lot of different ideas from Wyoming, and I've been impressed how they've been rocking and rolling through that thing. Quick update on the Wyoming State Shooting Complex. As you know, our agency is a pass-through for that $10 million for the siting, construction, operation, and maintenance of that facility. We're working with the Joint Powers Board on that memorandum of understanding right now. That should be completed. My gut is within the next 2 months. It's a little complicated because the Joint Powers Board is leasing from state lands, the land. They're also working with us because we will own the buildings once they are built, but they will do the managing and the construction of the buildings. So that's what we're working through right now. So all those separate MOUs and other things. They've been great to work with. They're very committed. They're very passionate. And we look forward, you know, our job is to make sure that money is spent responsibly. And so we're taking that seriously and working with them on it. And we've been in agreement. There's been no big issues. And I can see us moving forward relatively quickly on that. 2 other quick things, and then I'll see if you have any questions. New numbers just came out for visitation last year. 4.8 million visitors at our state parks. It was up 5% from 2023 and also up 5% from the 5-year average. So far in 2025, we're running about 7% above where we were last year at this time. Now, you may hear those numbers and go, wait a minute, you were at 5 million something last year. And you're right. Essentially, what happened is we found a traffic counter at Hot Springs County that had been defective for several years. And it had been overcounting by about 600,000 visitors a year at Hot Springs County. So that has been fixed. We have a new superintendent there that caught it right away. So we went back and adjusted those previous 5 years numbers before that to reduce those, to make them more realistic from what they are. I'm a little embarrassed up here telling you that, but that's the case, and we fixed the situation.
Was that a hand count? It must have. I just wondered if it was one of those machines or if it was those machines that fly around, or, you know, there's a lot of concern on that front these days.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, it's actually,
Senator Warner and I are on the Corporations Committee together. That's why I couldn't resist.
it's actually a magnetic counter and they're usually adjusted to go halfway across the highway at the entrance, one of the entrances. And this one was adjusted to go a little bit farther. So every car that went in and out was counted versus just the vehicles that went in for that one entrance.
Gotcha.
Lastly, I just want to highlight some of our summer programs. From mid-May to mid-September, we're offering 440 summer programs with our agency this summer. Pretty impressive. And it's not, the majority are at our state parks and historic sites, but it's not just those. We have an archive speaker series. The museum is actually in the middle of Civics Month right now, where they have a lot of events happening. Volunteer digs with the state archaeologists, archaeological fair. You know, one of my favorite things in my job, I work above the museum, is to come downstairs and see what's happening. And sometimes there's 300 school kids running around the museum, screaming, teachers running around all over the place. Other times there is an elderly group learning about how to use Google Maps in the classroom. And it's just so exciting to see all those things that are happening. So go to our website, look at some of those events, and we'd love to see you out there. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that's it. And I would stand for any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, Director, thank you very much. That was a lot. We appreciate it. Let's start with Representative Provenza and then we'll go to Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe you know this answer. Do you know how many acres of land the state parks manage?
Director, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, I say no, but I will have that answer to you. I know Nick is behind me on his cell phone right now, asking that question, and I can get back to you.
Yeah. Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, it basically deals with the uptick in visitation. And I'm wondering if you feel like you have enough seasonals to deal with all the extra visitors that you're seeing.
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Schuler, for the question. We're doing fine with seasonals. In the past, we have a certain amount of seasonals that we are allowed to hire. In the past 3 or 4 years, we've never been able to get to that number because we couldn't hire enough people. It seems like that has settled down. We've done a lot of recruiting out of state. And one of the things we've done is used some of our resources to build dorms at our larger parks. So Keyhole State Park, Glendo, maybe some of our more remote parks such as Seminole. And what that allows us to do is bring in different folks from college programs, university programs, and it's been very successful for us. So we have not had a huge issue this year on that.
Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for state parks. When you are looking at your site criteria, and when you talked about your staffing and how lean and mean your staffing is, do you consider your ability to staff as part of your criteria, or do you just say, no, we're going to look at this, we'll figure out how we're going to be able to staff if it gets approved, and you keep adding more sites on? Is that part of your thought process when you're looking at the criteria?
Director, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Connolly, absolutely it is. I'm going to give an example. Gray Rocks Reservoir, we're in the throes of that site criteria process right now. When we look at that, we say we're going to need 5 full-time staff. One of those would be in law enforcement staff. We're going to need X amount of dollars for campgrounds, campsites, housing for staff. We go through that whole process. And that's the package we bring to the legislature. And the reason, frankly, that one is stalled right now is we've done the math and it's roughly about $25 million to do what we need to do. That does not include the annual operating budget or the staff for that. I'm not comfortable coming forward to you right now and asking for $25 million and 5 staff and $1 million a year operating budget. So that's why that one has stalled right now. But that's a great question. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I could answer Representative Provenza's question, 98,830 acres.
Go ahead, Representative Provenza.
Thank you for that. Director, I think there's been a lot of conversation from the legislature to turn over, say, BLM land to state management. BLM, I think, has 18.4 million acres of land in the state of Wyoming, and I'm wondering if you feel that state parks would be well suited to take on 18.4 million acres of public land.
Director, that's a hot one. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, can I?
There's a.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, we punch above our weight at this agency. I do believe that there are certain places that we could manage and do a good job on. The idea of giving us that many millions of acres without the resources, without anything else, still needing to follow federal guidelines, our agency couldn't do it.
Representative Campbell, and then we'll come back to Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple of questions not related. Well, they're related to you, but not to each other. So when you talk about staffing and just the comparison, the example you gave us with Texas and their largest state park, ideally, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here, if you could have as many staff as you needed to feel comfortable, what would that number look like?
Director, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, that's a great question. And I would need to think about that, but I can tell you my gut is one of the biggest issues we have right now is the need for more law enforcement. Things have been changing a lot. I talk about Glendale, and that's one of those parks. I have one full-time law enforcement officer. Sometimes there's 35,000 people at that park. One of the things we do a really good job on is the use of seasonals. We use a lot of seasonal law enforcement officers, a lot of seasonal staff. Our summer is our busy time. It's 90% of our visitors, where Texas, it may be sprawled out a little bit. So, we have really been focusing on the seasonal aspect, let's bring people in when we need them. You all have asked us to run like a business, and that's what we're trying to do. And then they can go back to college or go home and do other things. As far as I would need to think that through before I blurted something out, but it would be maybe an additional 2 or 3 staff. It would not be an additional 20 staff.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And one more?
Yeah, absolutely. Follow up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Not really a follow-up, but just in terms of the federal funding and the cuts we're seeing coming out of the feds, how much of your budget or relies on some of those federal funds or grants that may be in limbo or you're just unsure of right now?
Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, Sarah's walking up to talk about the cultural resources side. What we have seen on the park side, we have not seen a big hit yet. There's a lot of we don't know. We are in constant conversations with the governor's office on this. They're not looking at it just from a state parks perspective or cultural resources. There's state forestry, there's fire, there's all those things. So we're working constantly with them and having discussions on where we feel we need to be and offering help if we need to. But if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I would love to have Sarah talk a little bit on the cultural resources side, because we have started to see a hit from that.
Absolutely. Director, thank you, sir. Good morning.
Yeah. Good morning,
see you.
Mr. Chairman. Committee. So Representative, the short answer right now is that I have 2 programs in particular that receive federal pass-through grants and this is every state receives these grants. One is the Arts Council receives grants for the National Endowment for the Arts. And the other one is the State Historic Preservation Office, who receives historic preservation funds through the National Park Service. Right now, by this time of year, we typically have a apportionment letter that comes to us, tells us how much the state's going to receive, and that's our opportunity to officially apply for those funds, and then we start drawing down the funds. We get approval and we start drawing. We have not received that letter yet saying what our apportionment is. It was in the budget, passed in the budget, but we haven't received our letters. And so Of course, we're keeping tabs on it. We're asking all the questions. We just aren't getting any answers about when that might be forthcoming. And I guess the biggest impact, one, with the Arts Council, there are grant funds that we typically pass through that we're not able to right now. And I do have several staff in the Arts Council that are funded. 50% of their funding comes from that and 50% from the state. And then on the historic preservation side, I have quite a few staff that are either partially or fully funded with the monies. And of course, we are running into a situation where we're not going to have any federal funding to pay those folks anymore. And the big impact on the SHPO side, I think, to think about is the energy projects that happen in the state have to they have to consult with the SHPO's office. And that will impact our ability to respond to those if we don't have enough staff to do that. So and there've been other pass-through grants that go directly to organizations that have been cut, but those don't come through us.
Good question. Okay, anything else, committee? Director, I do have something, and I'm not quite sure when and how and where to bring it up, but it was all about this site consideration piece. I belong to a coffee clutch, and that's where all the work gets done in Wyoming, as you know, and a lot of brilliance at the table every week at this one that I belong to. And the topic of the hot area out around our reservoirs came up many times. And I'm talking about Pathfinder and Alcova and the Miracle Mile. And for those who have not been there, it is one of the prime targets for the blue ribbon fishery that it is for all kinds of visitation. Those reservoirs are getting hit harder and harder, which is not news to anyone because all across the state, all of our sites are getting hit harder and harder. But the notion, in fact, one of our commissioners was there and indicated that it might be worth looking at that area as a state park, not different from Boyson, for example. And would that give us different leverage to be able to talk with the federal government? Because for a long time, I have felt like the Bureau of Rec needs to get out of the land business and stick to the water. We've had all sorts of issues out around those reservoirs that come to my desk. And any thoughts about that? I guess I don't want to put anybody in a tough spot, but I would love maybe at the next meeting, for example, to learn a little bit more about what that would mean, and would it leverage different things and allow us to visit with the feds better? Would it, what are the pros and cons? Can you touch on that?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that. There may be another member sitting on your side of the table that can help with that as well. We actually went up and met with one of your county commissioners and Representative Campbell to discuss this a while back, and we have received a letter of request for us to start the site criteria process for Alcova and Pathfinder. We've been in discussions a long time with the Bureau of Reclamation about Miracle Mile, us and the Game and Fish, working with them. We've toured it with them. We've had a lot of discussions about that one as well. If I look at the reservoir parks that we manage on the Bureau of Reclamation lands, those two reservoir parks would fit right in with our system. But again, it's going to cost money to be able to come in. They bring in some good revenue with the rentals and the cabins and other things. But we are going to go through that site criteria process and take a look at that. And the other thing I would say with you is, I agree with you. I think sometimes when we work with the Bureau of Reclamation, we have a different relationship than the county has. So we may be able to have different conversations with them than the county has at the same time. I also want to throw out one discussion that has been had recently, started several years ago, but it seems like it's picking up a little steam, is, the Bureau of Reclamation is actually, we've had discussions with them about those lands. All of our large reservoir parks are owned by the Bureau of Reclamation. We have a management agreement with them. Bureau has openly and honestly said, we don't do outdoor recreation. We do water, we do dams. So we have started to have conversations of, is there a potential to transfer some of those lands around the reservoir to the state that are already state parks, so the state can manage those? Obviously would take a national act of Congress to do that, but we're starting to have a few conversations just to learn a little bit more and seeing if it's even feasible to do.
Thank you, Director. Good comments, and I appreciate the representative being on point and already having that conversation with some of our leaders in our part of the state as well. But committee, and I'm looking at Senator Hicks, Senator Bonner, many of us have been around a little bit longer, and for a long time, we have talked about land transfer. And it just feels like to me, there's an opportunity at the national level right now that if our committee could somehow help with some leverage to talk with our delegation or to send some correspondence to the Bureau of Rec, those are the kind of things that I'd be interested in, Director, and maybe come back to this discussion in a second or third meeting of this interim. Maybe it carries forward into the next year, but I can't think of many things that would be better for our state than if we could, for example, I know the state can do a better job at the Miracle Mile, for example, if we're given the opportunity. We already do with just assisting the Bureau of Rec. But imagine if we could actually manage that property. I know that our folks could do better. So does that all make sense? It just seems to me like we've got an opportunity here.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you, and I think the Miracle Mile is a great example. Bureau of Reclamation lands, there's some state lands next to it, BLM lands around the outside of it. There's a campground that the doors don't close in the bathrooms. There's nobody that collects funds. It's falling apart. The fisheries, when we toured that with Game and Fish, talking about this potential transfer, and I shouldn't speak for them, and I won't speak for them, but they were very excited about the opportunities for habitat improvement. We were excited about concentrating some of the camping, getting rid of some of those outlaw dispersed camps where people go out and circle 15 trailers and do their things. I think there's a lot of things we can do parcel by parcel, such as the Miracle Mile, such as, around a certain reservoir or something like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Director. Senator Bonner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think maybe now's the time to have that discussion. We all know that, the federal land management in the state often just on a day-to-day basis leaves us wanting, but there's good, precedent for, say, Good Neighbor Authority that works, with our state forestry. And maybe now's the time for some creativity to, do something proactively, even if it isn't a full-on land transfer. Let's look for opportunities to manage that at the state level and potentially get around some of the federal bureaucracy or the federal roadblocks that lead to the dilapidation of these resources. So I think maybe now's the time to have that conversation. There's an openness, I think, to that sort of reform, recognizing that, a lot of the land management policies are at least 50 years old at the federal level and just haven't kept up with the times. So yeah, I look forward to, doing what we can there. Having been involved with, some federal land management policy in other areas, I think there's plenty of room for opportunity. So I think that's something the committee could talk about, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel, Mr. Chairman. We don't have to do a full-on land transfer either.
Good thought, Senator. Representative Provenza, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to push back on that. I think what we're hearing is that we're not potentially giving our state agencies enough money to adequately meet the demands that they have right now. You have one law enforcement agent with 35,000 people in an area. And every time we talk about transferring any of these federal lands or trying to put them in state hands, the problem becomes that we're not willing to pony up the costs for it. And this state can't actually manage these lands. So then what ends up happening is the state's going to have to sell it or figure out something else, and it's no longer public land. So I think we need to be incredibly careful about talking about moving and transferring lands to state agencies that we're not willing to fund adequately right now, Mr. Chairman.
Good points made. Let's go to Representative Wharf and then back to Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I got a comment. One of the things that I think is not being discussed or considered is the mineral royalties that come with those federal lands. I think it's long past time for the state to start claiming what's ours. Those lands belong to the state of Wyoming. They should have been given to us upon statehood. 1976 is when we changed the law and no longer dispose of those lands. But those federal resources, they take half of our mineral royalty. And that's roughly about $500,000 or $500 million that could be coming into the state. And I think that's something that can't be lost in this discussion. We don't just want to take management of those lands. We want those lands to be fully and completely turned over to the state. I look at all the states in the eastern part of our country that have their mineral wealth. They're not forced to share that with the nation. And I think it's long overdue for Wyoming to start pushing back a little bit. And I know that's going to spin a few more heads, but I think the reality is I think as Senator Boner said, there's a lot of opportunity right now. And I do think that it's only appropriate if the state's going to take on that management, the state takes on all of that management, which would also include our minerals. And so I think we can't lose sight of the fact that it's not all cost, that there are benefits that come from this. And I think the biggest benefit that comes from this is we can truly become a sovereign state like the rest of the states. We're no longer dependent on PILT money to make up for the management of our state.
Okay, well, so Representative, I think you do make a point, and that that's one of the leverage points that the state of Wyoming has.
Mr.
Whether or
Chairman,
not that
just as a
pertains
question,
directly to the Travel and Recreation and Wildlife Committee, that's what we need to kind of ascertain.
well,
That's
and
a piece of it.
this is the question I'm going to ask, because I'm supposed to ask a question. Now, if you had $500 million coming into the state, do you think the state could find the money to give you that you needed to manage your resources?
Yeah. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Bannon, I would flip that right back to you, Representative Wharf, and say you're the legislator. You guys are the ones that make those decisions, not me. I'm not going to speculate on that one.
Thank you, Director. And Representative Storer, I missed you earlier. I apologize. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just comment on that and say that I do think exchanges and transfers of some of the is at least possible, but we do need the resources to manage those. And we also need the federal personnel to help execute those kind of agreements. And right now I'm worried that we're seeing a reduction in force at the federal government that's going to make that hard to do. But I'm gonna go back to law enforcement for a minute with my question to you, Dave, and just say, we passed SF4 that, changed the definition and scope of the authority of your peace officers. So I just wanted to follow up. We don't ever look back that often at the legislation we passed. So just what that means for training your seasonals, how will you measure whether, that piece of legislation made sense and be able to tell us how that's helped you manage the state parks. I was just curious if you guys have looked at that. Thanks.
Thank
Director,
you,
go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Storer. That the idea behind that wasn't helping us to manage our state parks. The idea behind that was to help us help other communities that were around state parks. So the example that we give a lot is at Boysen Reservoir. It's 45 miles around to the other side of the reservoir. Part of that, you go out of state parks land and on federal highways and city highways or county highways. When our officers saw something happening that was potentially life-threatening, they would have to call in and ask for permission or let the sheriff know. Then the sheriff would say, would you take care of it? Then we could actually flip our lights on and go pull those folks over. So what it's doing is helping us build better relationships with those communities. So when we are in a bind, with that MOU, the sheriff's office will be screaming out there to help us, and we're doing the same to help them in certain situations.
So Director, we a couple more questions, but then we'll move on because we've got some topics ahead that, and by the way, lots of folks streaming in today, and we're going to do the best we can when it comes to public comment. But there are lots and lots of folks lined up and ready to visit with us. Let's just know that going forward, I think you can tell there's a lot of interest on the committee's part. Great points made. We do need to offer the support to your agency that we feel like the Travel and Wildlife Committee needs to recommend. So let's keep that in mind. Let's keep in mind the points made on this transferability, and maybe some communication officially from our committee, Mr. Co-Chairman. Maybe that might be in order and might be helpful to our delegation or others. But absolutely, we need to support it if we decide to approve some of these sites. So, Mr. Co-Chairman, you had something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And we did get it back on track here when we got off track a second ago, but I think this might be an opportunity as we're having this discussion, and as the director first mentioned, partnerships. And I was lucky enough to take a field trip, do a little product testing out on Miracle Mile, one of our last TRW meetings. And I was pretty alarmed at the condition in which that BOR land was in. I mean, it was pretty alarming to see what the human factor had done to that area and that piece of nature. So I think this is a great chance to your point, Director Glenn. How far into that process should we get before we talk about this as a committee on those 3 specific locations that the chairman mentioned? And is this a good, a test run at how we as a body can get involved? Because quite frankly, and this has been commented on, I mean, this is nothing without supporting your agency. We're going into a budget year, but we're talking about potentially 3 different facilities, 3 different pieces of land spread out Miracle Mile is out there. And demanding a lot of your department if we do go down that road. So I think, and Representative Connolly hit on a little bit earlier, as we get through this site criteria process, in this specific example, is that something are we at a point that we could go back to our body or this committee, maybe at our next meeting in August, when we're in Casper, maybe go out and look at it and have this discussion, because, I certainly, if the last Arboretum took 450 hours and it was 12 miles from State Parks headquarters in Cheyenne, it might be 1,200 hours if we're going to start looking at these 3 other sites. So I don't want to get into the weeds with the transfers and the federal government stuff, but I think partnerships, that's what's screaming to me right now. I think there's great opportunity here. We already are doing it at other sites. So I would ask, the director and Co-Chairman Landon, that is this a good chance to maybe explore this more as a committee and figure out if it's something that we should be getting involved in on a more case-by-case basis, so we can be more efficient before we come to the body and the body says no.
Director, comments on that?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I think it's a great idea to have that conversation. The one thing I want to make really clear is Bureau of Reclamation has been great partners with ours. They have been very good to work with. They answer the phones. The director and I talk probably every 6 weeks, have a conversation on what's going on, how we can help each other. They've been very, very good to work with. And I just wanted to clarify that as well, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it. Director, thank you for all of that. I think you can tell, I'm really proud of this committee. I think this committee has a lot of bandwidth and a lot of passion, as you can tell. And I think if we can identify some places that might assist policy-wise, with what you do, let's be looking for opportunities on that front. And I agree with the co-chairman. Maybe we can take a closer look at that property down in the center part of the state. That's kind of what we're doing up here today, too. So, let's keep going. We've got, good topics ahead. So, let's go on to, non-motorized trail fees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll have Deputy Director Chris Floyd and a few other folks come up and thankfully pass the mic to them and sit in the corner over here.
Okay, we'll
Thank
go
you.
to the deputy here in a minute. And by the way, I wanted to thank Sarah for coming forward. I was able to sit in committee on the Cultural Resources Trust Fund committee the other day down in Casper, our Cultural Trust Fund folks, and it was just really informative, and they do a great job. Chairman Stubbson ran a great meeting, and it was just good to see everyone on that front. So I commend them. And you have some colleagues here, Director, that I failed to kind of mention. I see Mr. Tesoro back there, good friend of ours from the Southwest, and others. You've got commissioners listening in, I'm sure. So we should have maybe tipped our hat to them. Okay, Deputy, let's keep going.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Chris Floyd, Deputy Director of State Parks and Cultural Resources. And I'm joined with, up here with me is Forrest Kaminga, who's our Rockstar Program Manager for all things trails. He's the manager of the State Trails Program, motorized and non-motorized. So appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today about this important topic. This has been something at the forefront of our minds for a long time. And that is funding for non-motorized trails. I'm going to try to keep it pretty high level, roll through it. We can get into the details and weeds as much as we need to, and that's one of the reasons why Forrest is up here with me. But before I get into that, I just want to say thank you to those of you who were able to attend the Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Summit this year. We appreciate that. We had that about a month ago. It was great to see you all there. We do that in partnership with University of Wyoming Worth Institute. So Dr. Dan McCoy, Mark Tesoro in the Office of Outdoor Recreation co-host that each year. So hopefully we'll see some of you all next year as well for that. So on non-motorized funding, I've got a little bit of background work and sort of global perspective to add to it before we get towards a suggestion or two that we have that you might want to look at. Basically what I want to get to at the end of this, so you know where this is going, is we have a motorized program that's great for motorized trails. And what you might look at is using that model for non-motorized trails as well. But we'll get there. I just need to sort of lay the groundwork. We have more requests for non-motorized trails, summer or winter, warm weather, cold weather trails, than any other types of requests that we receive through the Office of Outdoor Recreation. That's been true for quite a few years. And part of the reason is because we do have a good funding source for motorized. You all remember the snowmobile decals and the permit process we went through with you all earlier this year. We also have the same type of funding for ORVs in warmer weather months. So if there's a motorized trail out there that needs, maintenance, construction, signage, if we need some educational programs, enforcement, all that kind of stuff, we've at least got a funding source for that. It's not unlimited, but at least there's something there. We don't have anything that's the equivalent of non-motorized for non-motorized trails. And let's talk about definitions real quick. So obviously motorized recreation, we're talking about things with a motor. Okay. So ORVs, side-by-sides, snowmobiles, motorcycles, things like that. If you're talking non-motorized, it's things without a motor. So that's things like mountain bikes, hiking, equestrian, cross-country skiing, fat tire bikes, in the winter over the snow, snowshoeing, those kinds of things. But I want to introduce you to another term, and I don't want to muddy the waters, but it's a way of thinking about this that may be helpful. And that's mechanized recreation or mechanical recreation. Mechanical recreation is where you bring a piece of equipment, whether it's motorized or non-motorized, to your trail for recreation. So mechanical includes, the ORVs and the snowmobiles and all that, but it also includes mountain bikes, fat tire bikes. It could include cross-country skiing if you consider the skis and all that to be, mechanical equipment. There are some moving parts there, but that's different from, say, non-mechanical recreation, which is where you're walking on your own 2 feet, or you're riding a horse. something like that. So a distinction to keep in mind as we go through the discussion, because I'm going to use that word a little bit as we roll through this. Some of you may have a question about e-bikes. What is an e-bike? Is an e-bike motorized, non-motorized? Well, I'll just tell you kind of where we are on that right now. There is some legislation or some statute about that, 315707, where it talks about how the land manager kind of defines what an e-bike is. But the way we do it in state parks and way we talk about it in state trails is we would consider a class 1 e-bike to be non-motorized, and there's 3 classes. Class 1 is pedal assist. In other words, it can't run on its own like a throttle like you would on a motorcycle or something. You have to still be pedaling. It just assists you in the pedaling. When you get to class 2, it can run on its own, and class 3 as well. And they go up to 20 and 28 miles per hour respectively. And we would consider those motorized. And we would say those should probably be on an ORV trail if they're operating. It's a tricky world though, okay? It's an evolving world. The e-bikes are getting more and more popular. It's difficult to enforce, and when you look at a bike, is that a 1, a 2, a 3, at a glance, and they're zooming by, you don't know. And I think the world's perception of them is changing a bit, and you're starting to hear some rumblings on the federal side about, maybe incorporating those into non-motorized trails, because they do, theoretically have a top end self-propelled speed limit of 28 miles an hour. But we're still at where we keep class 1 as non-motorized, but 2 and 3, that discussion's still going on in the future. So that could change at some point. So more specifically, I want to get into the problem or the why of why we're here having this discussion when it comes to non-motorized. And just stepping back the big picture, and I know this may be insufferable to some folks who've heard me say this before, but we've got a lot of new residents moving to states around Wyoming. The next 15 years, we're going to see over 4 million people in our adjacent states. In fact, Rapid City alone, that metro area, may add more people than all of Wyoming adds. Okay, that's what we're up against. So we're kind of surrounded, and that means we're going to see more people on our landscapes. They're going to come here for recreation. And that's not even talking about places that are far away where we have a lot of visitors from, places like California and Texas. Texas is going to get between 10 and 14 million people in the next 15 years. So we're going to just see more population, more people out there on the ground, and we've got to figure out, where we're going to put them and how we're going to manage all this. And a lot of those users, of course, are going to be non-motorized users. So we need all the tools that we can at our disposal to handle that kind of growth. We're going to need things for, maintenance and enforcement and construction. And if we don't provide the kinds of trails that people desire, that they're asking for, a lot of times they just go out there and make them themselves. We've seen a lot of bad trails pioneered in social trails over the decades in Wyoming. And some of our landscapes, especially the drier ones, it's hard for those to recover. Once you cut in a new trail, it can be a problem maintaining. And so sometimes we need reroutes, we need new construction, we need ways to adapt to those. And there's lots of examples of that all across Wyoming. So it'd be better if we had the way to get ahead of that and create some trail opportunities to direct folks to, as opposed to just kind of leaving it wide open where people go where they want to go, and they create problems sometimes.
Mr. Chairman, is it the desire of the chair to ask questions as we go, as the presenters, or just wait till the end?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Senator.
So when you talk about this, and I fully appreciate the demand that's going to be placed on Wyoming for outdoor recreation that's coming, because it's already here.
Yeah.
We've seen that. It's going to grow exponentially. But when we start talking about the aspect of non-motorized trails and stuff, and so we only have so many acres of state park lands where your agency has jurisdiction. And so when we talk about trying to regulate or all this other stuff, it really is going to come down. Our state trust lands are different. The way we manage those, they go through SLIB board, but it's really a federal issue for the most part, is it not? I mean, we're not seeing this expansion on private property. And so how do you as an agency interface? Because getting back to regulation, promotion, construction, management, maintenance, revenue gathering, we're dealing with the federal government back on that for the broad scope of this. to a smaller extent, but so how do you bifurcate that? I'm trying to understand what's even our role, trying to tell the Bureau of Land Management that you shouldn't have this pioneered. We got them all over the place out there, and obviously they're not doing the job, or we wouldn't be talking about it. But how would you anticipate dealing with the federal government on this issue, land management agencies?
Good question, Senator. Go ahead, Deputy.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, that's a great question. So when it comes to our trails program, and just using the motorized as an example, because that's kind of where we're going with this conversation, they do provide those services on federal lands. And what they bring to the table is the funding. So yeah, the BLM or the Forest Service, they don't want a bunch of pioneered in trails, and they want better trails and whatnot. So they apply for grants for our program, and either we do the work or we hire out the work that can be done. And we also pay for enforcement and education, things like that on any, it could actually be on private land too. Anything that's an enrolled route in our state trails program, we have the ability to bring our resources to the table.
So I imagine as you go forward in your presentation this morning, this interagency piece is going to come up, and yeah, that's
100%.
It's a big piece of everything we do, isn't it? Especially in Wyoming. So, any follow-up? Go ahead, Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman. So for motorized access in the winter and the trails that we're talking about, but the funds are coming from the federal government, the motorized community is paying for their stickers to be on those trails in the winter and the summer. I know in my neck of the woods, we run into cross-country skiers, the fat tire bikers, snowshoers, and the sled dog teams. I think a fair amount of the sled dog teams do buy the stickers because I know they see the value in it. But how many of these other folks have you seen buying stickers and contributing? Because they're definitely using the trails. We see them out there.
Deputy Flood, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones, thank you. We do see non-motorized users on motorized trails, and it varies depending on the location. There's no requirement for them to buy a permit or a decal right now. And that's kind of why we're having this discussion. Now, there is a little bit of a voluntary spirit in some cases, like you mentioned, some of the dog mushers, and that we've seen that a little bit with some fat tire bikes. And there was famously a bike shop in Lander that was encouraging people, if you're on motorized trails, buy these permits to contribute to pay in, but it's not required. So I don't think it's having a huge impact on the funding, but at least there's the beginnings of that spirit of paying in, like motorized has been doing.
Yeah, good question. Follow up, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there's an event that's held in the Pinedale area, the Drift, and I think they bike, they run, maybe that's it. But do you know, does that event buy any stickers or pay for anything to use those trails? I think it takes place over like a 48-hour period or something. Are you aware if they pay for anything for the use of those trails?
Deputy Director, do you want it, or do you want us to go to the trail boss?
We'll let Forrest take a swing. I don't think I know the answer to that, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, committee. Forrest Kaminga, Trails Program Manager. To answer Senator Jones's question, they do not necessarily purchase or are required to purchase any of the registrations to run that race. They do, I believe, donate to the local snowmobile clubs for the assistance in the race. And then I will add, what we're going to see because of, the fine work of this committee and getting our snowmobile user fees increased this last legislative session, there's a potential we're going to be pricing those non-motorized users out of just voluntarily opting in to purchase that $50 or that $75 user fee to get out on the trails. So this could be an opportunity to get them on the trails and allow them to pay to play at a little less of a cost.
Okay, thank you for it. Appreciate it. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my question really is what that might look like. You know, when Senator Hicks and I both served on the governor's wildlife task force, one of the ideas I floated was a conservation stamp kind of idea for the hikers and the backpackers. I tear up a lot of our resources with my feet. So we do consume and need to be contributing to that, you know, the maintenance of those trails. And I think like any other user, you get the hikers, the backpackers, the, you know, bike riders and the mountain bikers and would willingly, you know, contribute to the maintenance of those trails. And I think that's important. So the question, whether it's a sticker or whatever that looks like, how do we enforce that?
Okay.
You know, and are you equipped to then be able to enforce and follow up on those additional users?
That's the $10,000 question, Director. Deputy, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, thank you for that question. Getting a little ahead here, but I'm going to get to the weeds on some of that. But just as a preview, I would say that if you mirrored a non-motorized funding program on the motorized, you would have an enforcement mechanism. In fact, you could actually use the folks that we pay for enforcement of motorized, a little bit out of a fund for non-motorized, a percentage of that to do enforcement for that as well. And we have above 90% compliance on our motorized decal program right now. So you could replicate that, we believe, with the non-motorized. Now, the question of how your permit or your fee is displayed, is that a sticker? Is it electronic? Is it a combination? We could go a lot of ways with that, actually. So thank you.
Anything else, committee? Okay, please continue.
I'll keep it
Deputy
rolling.
Lloyd.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman. So again, just going back to the big picture, what the need is here. In the last 5 years, we've had $47 million in requests for non-motorized trails. And that's bubbled up from communities. This is not necessarily, you know, our agency asking for this. These are communities asking for more and better non-motorized trails. We can fund some of that through some smaller grant programs we have, but really we were able to fund about 24 million of that incredibly because of ARPA. Okay. But that's a one-off, that's done. And so of those requests, there's still 23 million sitting out there. And I guarantee you there's many more that are percolating up as well in our community. So there is a demand for it. And again, there's just that huge gap between what's being asked versus what we can provide. Another thing is going back to those existing funding sources. Right now, for non-motorized trails in the state of Wyoming, we really only have one main reliable source of funding, and that's Federal Recreational Trails Program dollars, federal RTP. And those are administered by Federal Highway. We have about 400,000, a little north of that each year for non-motorized trails. And I have to tell you, for a state our size, that does not go very far. Okay, that's eaten up. And in fact, we have a lot more applicants than we do money each year.
Can you state that amount again?
A little over 400,000 a year for the whole state.
Thank you.
Okay. And that includes summer and winter recreation. So that includes grooming for non-motorized trails. It includes trail construction in the summer months. So it's oversubscribed. And, you know, it's starting to show we're way behind some of our neighboring states in terms of miles of trail that they have for non-motorized. I mean, we're, you know, states adjacent to us sometimes have triple or quadruple the amount of trails we have. So they do have larger populations as well, but we have big landscapes. And, you know, we also have a lot of people who come here. You know, our population actually swells a lot in the summer, especially with visitors from out of state. So our effective population on the landscape is a lot higher than what our, you know, 575,000 state population number would indicate. So there is a lot of demand for those trails, and we're having trouble meeting it. The next thing is, and this was mentioned earlier, is you know, the federal agencies are under some challenges right now in terms of staffing and budgets. And, you know, they look to us sometimes to help. You know, we've got a trail that needs maintenance. We got a trailhead that needs a vault toilet. We need enforcement. We need signage. And the first question we ask is that a motorized trail or non-motorized trail? If it's motorized, well, we've at least got a fund there that could probably help with that. If it's non-motorized, you're going to have to get in line for that 400,000 with those 20 or 30 other entities that are applying as well for that limited fund each year. And, we're also, quite frankly, starting to see, all the questions you all were, discussing earlier about managing federal lands, recreation on those lands. If we had to step up or had to take on some things, the non-motorized funding sources would be one of the tools that could help us do that. But that's, not in existence right now. So some questions we would need to think about, just another stepping back a little bit here is, what's the geographic scope of a program like this? Is it state lands? Is it federal lands? Is it border to border? Is it enrolled trails only, like are just the ones that are enrolled, or is it, everywhere in the state? Who pays in? There are a lot of different non-motorized users, mechanical or non-mechanical, non-motorized users. Who pays in? All right. And then finally, where does the money go? What can it be used for? For example, if one particular, group is paying for all of this, can it be used for other purposes as well? So like right now with motorized pays for everything on those trails, but all the other users get to enjoy them also. So would you replicate something like that for non-motorized? So real quick, I just want to talk about what the motorized model is in Wyoming, just as a reminder. So it's a pay to play, right? You want to ride these machines on these enrolled trails, you pay your fee. And it's by machine in Wyoming. It's not by person, it's by machine. And that includes, like we said earlier, your ORVs, your four-wheelers, your side-by-sides, all that kind of stuff. And that's true on federal lands, state lands, wherever there's an enrolled trail. And that program can provide a lot of different services for trails, as you all probably know. We talked about, education, enforcement, construction, safety, also adjacent infrastructure like trailheads, vault toilets, that kind of stuff can also be included in the motorized program. They utilize a lot of private contractors to do the work. It's not all just staff, although they do have a fairly adequate staff for those purposes. They peel off a small amount for administrative funding, less than 10% from those decal programs. Another thing they also do with the motorized program is they put a lot of time and effort and energy into defending access to public lands. So if a motorized trail is looking at being closed or modified in some way, they spend some time making sure that the federal agencies are considering all the perspectives involved in that, what that could mean for our users on the ground. So I would say this, if you were to look at using the motorized as a model for non-motorized, it may be a simple solution. Okay. And I understand there are going to be user groups and recreationists who have a lot of different opinions. There's a diversity of opinion about it. I think there is a general sense though, that if we're paying into something, these are the folks we've talked to anyway, if you're paying into something, as long as it's going back to that purpose, they're okay with it. So in other words, if someone had to pay, a $10 permit fee a year for mechanical recreation for a mountain bike or something like that, as long as that's going back into trails, I think they're okay with it. If it's kind of being peeled off for other purposes, not so much. And I believe the last time this came up, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that may have helped sink that effort at that time, where there was a peel off of a substantial amount for a different purpose. So that's just something to keep in mind based on what we've heard. What could a fee look like? How could you set that up? So with ORVs, OHVs, side-by-sides, in that program right now, they pay $15 a year. And that's for residents and non-residents. Now, you'll recall for snowmobiles, we've separated and we've created a resident and a non-resident rate. Maybe you could do that for a program like this. You could have maybe 10 or 15 to pay in for a resident. Maybe you do a little higher for a non-resident, 20, 25, 30, something like that. I don't think there'd be a lot of resistance, especially for folks, who spend a lot of money on these a lot of mountain bikes and other equipment that are very expensive, and having good trails to be able to operate, those investments on, I think might be worth it to a lot of folks. In fact, we mentioned that rate to some people. They said it should be higher than that, but I would say keep it simple. Yeah. So how could it be collected? Well, let's say, right now Motorized has an online platform. They sold over 32,000 permits for snowmobiles this year. Essentially, it'd be changing a website, just adding another option on there to purchase, and it could be mailed out, decals. You could also maybe have the ability to show an electronic pass on your phone. We don't quite have that in statute technically for Motorized right now. That may be something to look at in the future, is to adopt with changing times. But, that may be something starting fresh you could take a peek at. The other thing is, how much money would that generate if you did something like this? So the Motorized program sells over 90,000 permits in summer and winter each year. Let's say it's half that. Let's say it's a quarter of that. You're looking anywhere from 500 to 750,000 or even more a year. So you've doubled or tripled your non-motorized funding if you did something like that at those rates I mentioned. That's a ballpark, obviously. And we don't really have good numbers. We don't have like a lock solid number for how many mountain bikes are at Kurt Gowdy each day and things like that. We know how many people are on the trails and we can kind of eyeball it and see, but it's in the tens of thousands at some of our state parks. And we know it's going to be more when you start rolling in federal lands and things like that. And that's something I need to get to next is the enrollment. Okay. So on federal lands right now where OHVs and snowmobiles and things like that are operated, all those motorized trails are enrolled in the state trails program through these blanket MOUs. We would need to endeavor to try to do something like that for non-motorized, but it's up to the land manager, right, to decide whether they want to enroll. And that's even on a state section or wherever it may be, or if a private landowner wanted to enroll some trail, that's up to them to do that. But we would certainly push for that. And I think there would be some receptivity amongst our federal partners because we have, again, heard them many times requesting non-motorized funding, and we just don't have the ability. And I think there might be some interest in, if there is a funding source, tapping into that. And if a trail is not enrolled in the program, well, then it's not eligible for the grant funding, right? It's not in the program. So that would have to be sorted out through MOUs, through Forest Shop. I think initially, though, you can guarantee that state parks would enroll, and that'd be a place to start anyway. And we would start building out from there and trying to work on that.
Senator Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along those lines, clearly you have the ability to establish fees for those state parks, not maybe specifically for trails. Can you just go over what your current authorities are when it comes to fees for state parks? And is it possible to utilize the current fee structure to help support trails, at least on the state park land as a starting point? What's your current flexibility there? Can you add an additional fee, maybe above an entrance fee, for example, specifically for use of trails under current statute? What's the current lay of the land there?
Deputy Floyd, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bonner, my instinct would be that we could, we would have to go through a process, for fees and things like that in terms of public comment and whatnot. But, we do charge more for programs sometimes. We charge more for other activities beyond just the parking fee for a vehicle. So I think there is a way to do that.
Okay, follow up, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe that's the first step, is to understand where we stand now, and perhaps that could then be used to, even incentivize easements on private property, things like that. If we have, sounds like there may be a funding source already, but, and the legislature wouldn't necessarily have to do anything. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
Deputy Floyd, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Bonner, we do have a few examples of where we've had some private easements for the motorized program. And I think the liability is the big concern with private landowners. They want to know if I enroll in the state trails program, can the state kind of take on some of that liability? And that's what the motorized program has done in a few instances to help absolve some of those concerns. Yeah.
Senator, go ahead. Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Deputy Director, do you have a breakdown of the amount of trails that are actually on state lands that you do maintain with those motorized fees that are paid in?
Yeah.
Versus.
Deputy, go ahead. Or
yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones, I don't think we have that number right now, because most of our really almost all of our motorized trails, except for maybe a few exceptions, are on federal lands. And we could come up with that number. But on state lands, it'd be something different. And we don't, on state parks, there's, motorized trails are not typically a thing. It tends to be more non-motorized. And that's part of the problem we have right now is, how do we pay for those and maintain those? And state parks has its own internal funding for some of that, but there's limits to it.
Okay,
Follow up.
go ahead. Then we'll go to Senator Hicks.
So it wouldn't really help to increase fees in state parks, because then that means we're not actually charging the people who are using the trails then at that point. And I do have one more question too.
Sure. Go ahead, Senator.
So I was looking up, the federal RTP funds, and I'm not sure if everybody on the board knows how those are generated. Could you explain that? Because it seems like there's a weird mix that someone could come into the state with their electric vehicle and hit our trails, so they actually didn't contribute a single dollar.
Right.
So do we go to the trail boss on that one? Fourth, hey, do you want that one?
Yep. Chairman Landon, Senator Jones. So the way RTP works is it's a program based off the tail end of the federal highway fuel tax bill. And it's a tiny little sliver that they've used an equation to generate, how many gallons of fuel is burned through off-highway vehicles and snowmobiles. And then they distribute it according to population to each state. Right now, the allocation for the entire US is $81 million, and it is set to expire in 2026. And there's no reassurance that they're going to reallocate that. We're very hopeful that it does happen, but right now, in the state, it's we divide that out in a 30-30-40 split, 30% non-motorized, 30% motorized, and 40% diversified. The beauty of the state of Wyoming and the bylaws that the Trails Advisory Council has set, that 40% diversified has to have a motorized and a non-motorized component to it. And so that's where we, utilize a ton of that 40% to groom not ski trails, snow trails in the wintertime, along with, do some maintenance on some diversified trails in the summertime as well.
Oh, okay, Senator Hicks, and then we'll go to Senator Schuler.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate this discussion, but I think it's a little bit academic at this point in time. And so I want to bring the committee and everybody back to the reality that we face with. It's a budget session. Anything that we bring requires 2/3 introductory vote. And I don't think there's anybody on this committee believes that there's going to be there's declining federal funding. We've heard the discussions, the decline in workforce, to come in and generate a new user fee, which I believe in user fees, but I think that's a long shot. So the pragmatic side of me says it's academic and we don't have a concrete proposal, and it's going to have to take 2/3 introductory. So I would like to do, if we can, is focus on what we can do if we were so inclined to look at. So that leaves you with pretty much two alternatives. One is which Senator Boner was alluding to, is do you expand the use of existing fees that are collected to deal with some of this? So that's one alternative to look at. And the other thing is to potentially, you could divert some funding. And so one of the requests that we've got, that I've had over in my district, is, can we expand the use of the lodging tax for those local options to be used for infrastructure, not just advertising? In other words, they would like to be able to do something at trailheads, more parking areas, a restroom, those type of things. And so that's a diversion of an existing funding source, and it would be voluntary under that type of scenario to those local tourism boards, again, TRW, if they wanted to use part of that money. And that's just a statutory change to allow that to happen. And then there's always the tourism reserve account. But Mr. Chairman, and I think me and you've been here a long time, and if we're going to do anything and spend a lot of committee time working on bills and stuff, I think it needs to be grounded in a reality that what can we get done? And when I look at a new fee for non-motorized trails, I mean, I can already hear the argument, so can you, Mr. Chairman, what, it's not our responsibility to maintain trails on the federal government. We're going to hear all of that.
Sure.
But the introductory side, so I think if we would focus on a couple things that we can do that doesn't require new fees or whatever form of money, I think we'd be much more productive time. But
No.
that's just my suggestion based on. a
No, I
long
think,
time.
I think those are good points, Senator, and not to get into a full-blown discussion yet. I want to get to the senator and the representative here real quickly, but I would remind the committee that part of our duty is to examine policy issues as a group. And sometimes, at least the committees that I have chaired through the years, I like to bring issues to the body because I think that's part of our job too. And just because we know the hill is going to be steep to climb, doesn't mean we shouldn't try to climb the hill. If we deem that important and necessary from a policy standpoint, state of Wyoming, then our committee should take something forward and champion it. But you're absolutely right, Senator. There's multifaceted pieces of the attack. If the committee chooses to move some things forward with Mr. Fuller's help to the second committee meeting, for example, that we take a look at, we may choose not to forward something like a brand new fee or an extravagant thing, but we'll have a good policy discussion about it. So good stuff. Senator Schuler, and then we'll go to Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things I've thought about. We've talked about this for a number of years. And so this is not the first time that we've actually kind of thought it through. And I don't really know if I have an answer either, but I'm interested in knowing, I've hiked and biked in both Colorado and Utah, and I'm interested in knowing if you guys have any information on what they do with their non-motorized, because they have some good trails that are not in their federal parks, they're not in the Forest Service, they're not, state. And so I'm just wondering if you have any information from any of those states that might be helpful. And then also, I don't know, it just seems to me like they've got it down pat. I mean, the feds do. I mean, you go to generally there's a trailhead. So then you've got to place a fee area. I mean, I think it could be easy. I think you could do it online as well. But I think there's lots of things out there that could be very easy and not a tough transition. And, I understand Representative Hicks. I mean, when it's a budget session, everything is on and off the table pretty quickly. But it's worth taking a look at and seeing what other states are doing and seeing because I have people complain about it. We're seeing more and more and more, bikes, e-bikes, regular bikes out there with the hikers and I think about even in our state park over in my corner of the state, we have the state park trails, and then we have a private entity that's have actually done some trail work that connects those trails together. There's some nice collaboration there, but just to maintain those things, it requires some volunteer hours or potentially some hours from your folks to keep them in good shape. So glad to hear some of your thoughts on that.
So Deputy, we'll go to you in just a second to respond to that, and then on down to the representative. I will caution the committee that we do want to get to the Wyoming State Archives and to our museum folks. And we're going to try to do that and stay on the agenda because we've got a hard stop at noon. So great thoughts already coming forward on this front. And I know that we can visit at the end of this topic and decide what the committee wants to do. But Deputy, any thoughts to what the senator just asked?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, we did take a look at non-motorized funding in other states, and I believe you all were provided with a handout that kind of dives into that to show how other states do this. It's all over the place. As you can see from that sheet, there's many different ways that funding has been secured. Sometimes it's specifically intended for non-motorized trails. Other times it's just general recreation investment type funds, depending on the state. Colorado, you may have heard, has this funding source called GOCO, and it funds to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars for all kinds of recreational projects, including trails. Now, we do, of course, have the new Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust Fund, as you all know, and that's funded with tourism dollars. And that's reinvesting in the product of outdoor recreation, which benefits our tourism economy. And I just wanted to say something about that real quick, just to keep expectations realistic about that. First of all, it is taking tourism dollars and reinvesting, but the second thing is, so we already do that. So the second thing is, there's only going to be about 2 million a year for a while, if you look at the projections of where that fund's going to be. And then don't get me wrong, that's fantastic. We can do a lot with that. But even that is not going to meet the need, certainly not for non-motorized. Non-motorized is going to be competing with all other manner of requests that we're going to get for funding. So we're going to have a pretty thin soup there for a little while. Now, over a decade or two, okay, now you're talking. As long as that fund, it remains intact, it should generate enough revenue to fund all kinds of needs. But it's going to be a long time before we get to that point. So in the meantime, we're trying to figure out, how we can help non-motorized. And then the other thing is with that trust fund, there's going to be some kind of match requirement for that, or if not requirement, an effective requirement where it's scored somehow. And so what that's going to mean is non-motorized is going to be a little bit under the gun because it doesn't have a matching source like motorized does, like, hunting and fishing, things like that. There are these other funding sources out there in the world. And we're getting already lots of inquiries for different kinds of recreation that you may not even think about when we talk about, what is traditional outdoor recreation, but, some communities may be asking for ball fields, rodeo grounds, things like that, to have enhancements through that trust fund. What I'm getting at is there's just going to be a lot of folks very interested in that source. And so non-motorized is going to struggle, continue even with that source in place. Back to the other states. So what I did on that sheet is I kind of highlighted one of the
Deputy, I
columns
want to
there.
get, I apologize, but I want to get to the representative. She had a question
I apologize, yeah.
before, and then we'll let you finish up.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. More of a maintenance question, I think, on trails. And I'm going to set this up with a very selfish observation. As a backpacker, there are a lot of shared trails. So horses are also on those trails, bikes are also on those trails. And for me personally, I would argue horses and bikes do a lot more damage. So it gets a little frustrating. But I don't know from a maintenance perspective, if it's all the same. I mean, maintenance looks the same. It doesn't really matter who's on it or what's on it. So that would be the first question. So if it is a difference, then would we then need to consider maybe a tiered permitting, right? So it's this much annually for horses, it's this much annually for bikes, it's this much for feet. If there needs to be that designation, if it just kind of washes out the same.
Go ahead, Deputy.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, there is a lot of science about all of that. I'm loath to point to one group over another that is saying it has more impact, but I'll just say this: mountain bikes are not as bad as you might think because it has to do with the torque in terms of how the wheels go. They're continually touching the ground, and so you're not getting quite as much damage as you might think. But there can be, though, especially on muddy trails. Horses do have an impact. There's a lot of torque with that turning of the hoof, but people do too. I mean, I think it's a can of worms I wouldn't want to kind of get into personally in terms of how we would score that. But I would just say that everything's got an impact and just look at it that way. Now, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'll just quickly say on that sheet.
Yeah,
I
let's
showed you guys, and we're going to keep it rolling.
Let's get finished
Yep.
up because
Yep.
I do want to get
Yep.
to, we got a
Yep.
ton of public
Yep.
comment on this
Sure.
issue and it's something that
Yep.
a lot of people care about. So go ahead, Deputy.
Just on the sheet, if you look at the ones there's a column and with some blue highlights in it, that shows where other states do a user fee for trail access, which is kind of like our motorized model. And you might take a closer look at Indiana and Wisconsin in particular. They seem to be pretty close to what we're talking about here. And they've had some success with that. I'll also mention that Idaho tried a voluntary $10 sticker for mountain bikes. They generated the first year $18,000 after a significant marketing campaign. And then each year after that, they've generated about $1,000. Okay, so that's a voluntary program right there. They also tried and they're still doing this. They've tried a license plate, a license plate that you could buy that, for recreation or for mountain bikes. That one has generated about 20 to 30 grand a year. And their population is triple ours. So I'm not sure if those types of funding sources would work in Wyoming. Wyoming's a little bit unique. We may have to go our own path. And that's why I was, so focused on the motorized. Now, I do want to get to one thing though, in terms of who could pay into this based on the folks we've talked to. This is important. A lot of folks in the mountain bike community, not all, have expressed a willingness in that, again, if it goes to trails. We haven't had it quite that receptivity with equestrians. I think there's still some growth and some conversation that has to occur there. The other thing too, and speaking to what Senator Hicks was saying, is what would have a chance of getting through. I think if you were to say to people, I'm going to go hike on this trail, and now you've got to have a fee just to hike on a trail, that might raise some concerns with folks. I don't know if we're there yet on that, but I think with the mechanical recreation, with your mountain bikes, your fat tire bikes, your cross-country skiers, perhaps, there seems to be more willingness with those groups because they're the ones who are expressing a very high demand for those trails in particular, more than any of the other groups are. So if you were going to draw the line somewhere about who pays in, that might be a place to consider it. Just something to think about.
Okay. Deputy Director, thank you. And Representative Conley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When it comes to the fee structure, I'm wondering, have you considered, some going on these trails can be a really nice family event. You might have 5 kids with you. And the only thing that you can afford to do is go out and take a hike on the trails. So I'm asking, when you consider this fee structure, how that would be structured so that you don't prevent a family from being able to go out and recreate when that's the only thing they can afford to do.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Representative Connolly, great question. It's our opinion, and the discussions we've had have reflected this, is that youth should not pay a trail fee. And you could set the age of whatever that is. I think that would allay concerns of a family that maybe you got some kids out there on their bicycles and they're riding on a trail. Now every one of them's got to pay a fee to ride on. I don't think that's what we want. I think we're fighting a battle against screens as it is anyway. Let's make it as easy as we can for our youth to get outside. That's just my opinion on that. But that seems to have been a popular carve out in the discussions we've had is for youth.
Deputy Director, I'm sensing that we need to kind of close this off because I do want to get to our museum folks, our archives, very important stuff too. And I know you guys will be here for questions a little bit later, but we'll take it all up. For those who are very anxious to testify, we'll do the best we can with public comment here in a little bit, but I want to get to this next topic. Director, does that sound good? Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Let's go to, thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate you both.
Thank you all.
Okay. Well, Sarah, is that you? Thank you. Let's get started on this next little topic, bullet point on Wyoming State Archives research fees and the Wyoming State Museum fees. Another part of our world that is receiving more and more impact. So take it away, Deputy. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I neglected to introduce myself when I was up earlier. Sarah Sheen, I'm the Deputy Director over the Cultural Resources Division of State Parks Cultural Resources. I know we're kind of pressed for time, so we'll try to be succinct in our update to you. We had asked for consideration of an interim topic to look at changing and adding fees for the State Museum and the State Archives. So we had our Attorney General rep kind of look at what the existing statutes were. And I will tell you that one of the things we learned, and this should cut the time down quite a bit, State Archives by statute has authority. They're already charging some fees. They have authority to go ahead and make changes to those fees. So I don't think there'll be any action that this committee needs to take on that. And just so you know, and I'm happy to provide more detailed information to anyone who needs it on the archives fees, but some of those fees haven't changed for 30 years. copy fees, things like that. But of course, the technology that we use and that we're expected to use now has changed significantly,
Yeah.
which has increased the cost of doing business, right? So we are looking at trying to take those fees. We did a broad look at what other institutions in the area charge and just trying to keep it on a par with what other folks are charging so that we can recover some of the costs and, just make sure that our constituents are getting what they need and making sure that we can do that without having to come into, the legislative request through a budget ask. So that's good news, I think, that we'll be able to handle that. The other,
Appreciate the heads up,
Yeah.
though, Deputy. Thank you for bringing that to the committee and helping us understand that you have the ability to take care of that. But if we get a phone call, we'll have the background on it. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So then the second piece to that was looking at the State Museum, and they don't have any fees currently. We're looking at trying to, build a source of revenue for the State Museum to support their basic operations. Maybe look at expanding some services, renovating or adding to museum space that we currently have, providing more outreach to communities around the state. That's something we're supposed to do by statute. And it's pretty tough to do that with the budget that we have currently. So we have with us today the State Museum Director. He is going to introduce himself and kind of tell you where we're at in the thought process on those fees.
Good morning, Kevin. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Do the official thing, and state your
Good
name
morning,
for the
Mr.
record.
Chairman, committee. My name is Kevin Ramler. I'm the director of the State Museum. I'm happy to be here to chat a little bit with you all about this. I provided a couple handouts for you. One is just a broad overview of the museum, what we do for those of you who may not be as familiar with our programs. We kind of think about our impact in four big ways, and this kind of echoes what Director Glenn mentioned earlier. I mean, we have our core mission, which is that preserving and sharing Wyoming's history. We've been doing it for 130 years. 1895 is when we trace our history to, although there was a territorial collection before that we kind of inherited. So that's the big thing, but we also are a big economic driver for our region, bringing in a lot of those tourist dollars and really, to echo the director, punching above our weight in terms of the impact we have versus the inputs of state money that goes in. We have a big mission to support students and they're learning about Wyoming history and natural history. Over 30,000 students every year are reached through our field trips, our virtual programs, our trunks that go out into the classrooms around the state, and we're actually actively expanding that program right now. And in social impact, we're in the midst of a study that I'm pretty excited about that's going to kind of help us understand how having a museum in the community improves the fabric of the community, strengthens ties within families and within the community, increases lifelong learning. And we'll have results from that study coming out this fall or this winter. We're happy to share those with you all once they're here. But museums are kind of uniquely positioned to play that role. They're one of the most trusted institutions in any community. Over 90% trust museums highly, and they're usually the number one or number two most trusted source of information for people. So we are really important in that role. And so this topic of fees for the State Museum, we've been free for that 130 years that we've existed. We started in the Capitol building, and then we're in the Supreme Court and moved into our current location in the Barrett building in the 50s. And back in 2023, we did a statewide survey to kind of understand how we could better serve our constituents, the citizens of Wyoming, what they would like to see from the future of the museum. And that's that first chart you see on your handout there. What we heard back is exhibits, more history exhibits, more natural history exhibits, more space for exhibits, more immersive exhibits. That's what people really would like to see from their museum. Obviously, in our current facilities, we're somewhat limited in our ability to expand the footprint of those exhibits, but we would like to be able to offer a museum experience that meets our citizens desire, something that is a little bit more immersive, something that's more interactive. For those of you who have been to museums a lot, you probably have seen the change in the types of experience that a museum offers over the last 2 decades, from things that are kind of on the wall in a case with some text to things that have a lot of immersive elements, a lot of interactive elements, things to really get kids involved. And along with that evolution in exhibitry, we've seen a really big increase in costs of producing those exhibits. And so we're of course not unique in this situation that our costs keep going up, but our budgets kind of stay pretty flat or relatively maybe even go down a little bit. So we started to have these conversations. How can we support the museum? Sometimes it might be exhibits, sometimes it might be offering programs that people would like to see from us, but we don't currently have the resources to offer those programs. Great example would be birthday parties. We would love to be able to offer those for folks in our community, but we don't really have the staffing to be able to support something like that. Or even just replacing equipment is a struggle for us right now. So we've had those conversations. We looked at how some other folks in the state have done it with replacing exhibits. You see some figures on there from our friends over at State Parks and Historic Sites who have done some recent exhibitry. A Wyoming Office of Tourism who just kind of revamped their 2 visitor centers and the exhibitry there. And what we came back to is one of the reasons that those projects, those kind of big projects are possible is because of these revenue sources. So we thought we'd have that conversation with you all, with the State Museum. Is it the time to create a revenue source that can go towards those types of projects to help us better serve our constituents? On the back side of that sheet, you'll kind of see those comparisons both within our immediate community and kind of Cheyenne, Laramie County. We're the only free museum currently within the county there. And then broadly looking at some of the other state institutions around the West and kind of some of our neighbors directly to the south in the Front Range. So just to give you a sense of where the market is for museum entrance, people are generally pretty willing to pay for those things if it's a high quality experience. And it's a bit of a chicken and an egg situation for us is, we can't really offer the super high quality experience without the resources. So do you start charging first so that you can build up that experience, or do we need to build the experience first to justify the fees? The other piece of this all is if we were to implement entry fees at the State Museum, those new resources would allow us to expand into some of those other programmatic offerings. So, maybe an overnight kind of night at the museum experience for kids, summer camps, field trips, offering kind of classroom rentals. We have a great space. Some of you probably had meetings in our classroom surrounded by all the wonderful taxidermy. There's a demand for renting that space out. We currently have some limitations in what we're able to do with that. And so the kind of big fee piece could unlock some of those additional revenue streams with the resources to kind of build up some staff. And then finally, there's just a little kind of current picture of the revenue that we do generate. We have our gift shop, generates about $17,000 a year. We do take donations at the door. It's a fairly small amount. We do a lot of grant writing. We have a friends group that's able to provide a little bit of funding for us. So we do have some of those revenue streams, but none of that really is going to be able to make a dent when you're talking about needing hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce one new exhibit. And I think the other piece of that too is even large grants that will require a match. We don't currently have the funding to even match those grants. So if we wanted to go out and get a $250,000 grant, if that required a 1-to-1 match, there's no way we could do it. And so this is another potential way to bring in some revenue that could then match big grants for that.
Yeah.
So that's just a really high level overview, and happy to stand for questions.
Director, thank you. And just to make sure that the committee understood, this would probably take a statutory piece to allow for you to charge a fee, right?
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly right. We would require a statutory change to kind of allow us to collect those fees and to then spend those fees.
Okay, thank you. Representative Campbell. Go ahead. You good? That was it? Okay, good. Well, committee, we'll come back to this. Director, great job. I mean, that's very, you and I have worked together on a project for the last 2.5, 3 years, and we know all of what goes into that and what it takes and what the result can be. And it's absolutely terrific, astonishing. So, Deputy, anything else to add real quick, and then we'll get to public comment on all of this.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just something really quickly. I know hopefully all of you are going out on the tours this afternoon. I just want to prep you a little bit when we go out and look at the petroglyphs. Thought it'd be beneficial to just get you out to see some of the cultural resources that are on state lands. And I know this land is managed by Game and Fish Commission. It's a little bit different, but some of you might remember last session, there was a bill that was passed creating a misdemeanor criminal offense for causing harm to prehistoric rock art and setting some fines. It gave our agency permission to document sites on state land and, with some prohibitions to accessing private land without receiving permission from the landowner, which is appropriate. The original bill did not include any appropriation for the agency to begin this work. And so kind of what we've been doing in the interim is trying to figure out a sort of rubric, like what sites, what places do we try to do some documentation on first that maybe there isn't any done on already? Do we look at like what's most threatened, what has the highest level of historic significance, what has the most potential for interpreting prehistory and history to the public. So just so you know, we're in the background kind of working on that. And then I think a very important point to make is that as the State Historic Preservation Officer, I've had 20 plus years of experience dealing with projects on federal and state lands. We are very aware that and we're proactive about trying to find a balance between protecting, interpreting these places, recording these places, and the need for, development and extraction in the state. So just know that going into it, we're not saying one or the other. There's always a balance to be struck there. But I think really it's just about when you're out there today, think about, getting these places documented. They get threatened a lot as foot traffic increases, as we see more visitors in the state. They're becoming damaged. How do we, one, make sure they're documented so that if damage does happen, I don't even know how we would enforce the misdemeanor right now. If we don't have good documentation, how do you prove that something was damaged? So just some things to think about. And I hope to see you out there on the trail.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. Appreciate both of you. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, to catch you off guard there. I just want to give a quick plug. I had the chance to go to the museum with my family over session, and it was an experience that my son is still talking about. So kudos to them, and I would encourage. We did it as a TRW committee last session. 2 or 3 years ago, but what a great facility we have, and they really are. They're outperforming what you could ever imagine, given the resources that we are allocating to them. So something to think about, and the archive thing, certainly it's good to hear that there's some opportunity there, because they're taxed with a lot of asks and not a lot of support. So hopefully we can continue to have that discussion, but great job. Thank you both, and thank your staff.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I appreciate that.
Well stated, Mr. Co-Chairman. We're getting a lot for a little. Committee will come back to all of this, but I want to go to public comment. Is there anybody in the room that would like to come forward and comment on Wyoming State Parks and cultural resources? We've had 2 or 3 bullet items that, please, come on. We got to get going here, folks. Appreciate it. Good morning, Chris. Good to see you. Yeah, let's line up. We've got a couple of microphones up here. So if there's somebody else, let's have a lady in waiting.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, good morning. Chris Brown, representing the Wyoming Hospitality and Travel Coalition. Mr. Chairman, I realize time is tight, and frankly, I didn't come and anticipate speaking on this topic. Senator Hicks brought up the possibility of opening up the local option lodging tax statute to accommodate for capital construction and maintenance. That's something we've historically been opposed to, because the local option lodging tax is the primary tool that your local destination marketing organizations use to draw traffic to your communities. The state promotes Wyoming as a vacation destination domestically and internationally. Then the local option lodging tax board promotes your county to say, you've come to Wyoming, this is what Natrona County has to offer. This is what Sweetwater County has to offer. And the third leg of that stool is the private sector. You've come to Wyoming, you've come to our county, now come to my steakhouse, my hotel, etc. That said, Mr. Chairman, we proudly stood with Senator Hicks and others and supported the development of the Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust Fund. $3 million a year or $6 million every biennium of lodging tax dollars go into that fund. As of today, we would see that as a more appropriate funding source for this discussion. That said, Mr. Chairman, we are having a lodging tax board roundtable with the leaders of your local option lodging tax boards next week. Perhaps the tenor of the industry has changed. I'll make sure that this topic comes up. And should there be a desire to do so, as Senator Hicks proposed, I'd be back and I would report that to you. But as of right now, we would certainly prefer the trust fund that was established for this purpose to be used for those expenses. And I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Understood, Mr. Brown. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any questions? Okay, any further testimony, further public comment on state parks and cultural resources? Good morning. Welcome.
Chairman
Please
Lannon.
state your name for the record.
Yep. Dr. Daniel McCoy, Director of the J. Kemmer Worth Institute at the University of Wyoming. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment today. First, I just want to thank the Wyoming Office of Outdoor Recreation Manager Mark Tesoro. They're co-hosting and running of the 2024 or 2025 Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Summit. We had 18 sessions, 60 speakers and panelists, and 160 participants in Laramie in May. So, and thank those of the committee who were able to attend. Just quickly, I wanted to mention that something that might be relative to the committee and the discussion today. We just released a report on the economic impact of the ARPA outdoor recreation grants. The 20 million that was provided, 3 million in matching, generated 34.7 million in total economic output for the state and generated almost $1 million in local and state taxes. It's also projected to produce about 4 jobs per year through 2036. So you might have gotten a little ding on your phone. The report just came out this morning. As Director Glenn mentioned, we work closely with state parks and the Wyoming Office of Outdoor Recreation on many projects that help support outdoor recreation statewide. And in relation to the non-motorized user fee, we'd be happy to help study this in partnership with the State Trails Program. For example, we could involve students, as Senator Hicks referred to the academic exercise. We're pretty good at that at the University of Wyoming. So happy to help with that if that would be of interest. So that's, and I'm happy to stand for any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Any questions? Okay, let's keep moving. Thank you for removing your hat. I appreciate that. Good morning. Let's make sure the microphone's on and just please state your name for the record. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Alex Aguirre, and I work for the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. So our mission is to guarantee quality places for Americans to hunt and fish. And I just wanted to speak a little bit to the motorized or the non-motorized stamp. My background is trail work. I've worked private contract for the forest. I've also volunteered for the Backcountry Horsemen. So I know what the work is like out there. I know that it costs money. I know that it takes time, training. So we're in support of that. We're in support of responsible infrastructure. But we just wanted to make sure and voice that we keep wildlife in mind when we build this infrastructure. You know, a lot of hunters are also the guys out using the trails in the summer, but come hunting season, you know, the focus shifts, apologies. And yeah, so I would just support that as we move forward with these conversations, we keep our biologists in mind, we keep our sporting groups in mind. Yeah, so that Because I think we're ahead of the curve right now where we don't have, we're seeing growth, but we still have time to develop responsibly before it's too late and we see user created trails that, yeah, affect wildlife in our great state. Thank you. And I'll stand for any questions.
Very good points made. Appreciate you being here. Thanks. A lot of conflicting concerns on all of these fronts. Anyone else in the room want to testify on state parks and cultural resources? Okay, we've got a lot of folks listed for streaming in this morning. It's going to be very difficult to get to everyone and stay on our time, but let's try to get to about 5 folks. If something has been stated, I would ask that you not repeat it. Let's try to make sure you stay to about 2 minutes. Make your comments brief, and we'd love to get to you. So let's start. First, if you want to let Michael in, that'd be great. Mr. Kusiak, did I pronounce that correctly? Please take it away.
Good morning, Chairman Landon, and appreciate the committee's time. Michael
Okay, you're
Kusick,
muted.
Executive Director of
Michael, if you
Wyoming
can
Catholic.
Unmute, and we look forward to your comments.
I am unmuted on my end.
Oh,
Oh, wait.
he's not
Okay,
muted.
that might be our concern on this. And hang on just a moment, Mr. Kusiak, and we'll hopefully get to you in just a moment.
Says ABCs. Oh.
Let's see, maybe we could take about a 10-minute break real quick, committee. Let's take our break right now. And Mr. Kusiak, I'm sorry to hold you up, but let's take a break so that we can get the audio because we do want to get a quick look at some testimony from outside folks, and then we'll come back and finish consideration of this topic. So 10-minute break.
Mr. Kuzak, would you mind unmuting and seeing if we can hear you on our end?
Good morning. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Mr. Kuzak, I think we can hear you, so
Good morning. Is that better?
You want to use
1 minute, everyone, 1 minute and we'll get started.
Okay, folks, let's get ready to go. We've got public comment that we want to get to this morning and another important. Thank you, Senator Hicks. My guy, that got the attention. I think we're close to having. I think we're good to go. Committee, we have one of our former representatives here with us this morning, and he's got a few words of wisdom for you. Representative Betts, good to see you, bud. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, those who don't know you, my name is Bud Betts. We have a guest range, spectacular guest range, west of town at the Du Bois. You all are invited, lobbyists, legislators, everybody's spouse, everybody, to a reception on the range tonight, this evening, okay? So I'm gonna tell you two things. Now, we might have to cancel based on rain. We all love the rain, but anyway, it is tonight at 5:30 at Absaroka Range, okay? I know everybody knows how to spell Absaroka, but a lot of times you don't. So I'll pass this around. Go on maps, on whatever maps you are, okay? Just do Du Bois, Wyoming, to Absaroka Ranch, okay? Don't just do Absaroka Ranch, you'll see our office then in fact. So and it's about 15 miles west of town. Okay, and just follow the maps and follow the signs. There will be two gates that you go through, iron gates, powder gates, open and shut them, the Wyoming way, the Western way, and we hope it's going to be a go. So you will know, Senator Lang. Got my legislative protocol. Senator Landon will notify you as to, you will hear from him if it's off, okay? If it's off, he will text you after he comes out of the Whiskey Mountain Camp. Okay, also, the road. If everybody knows what a good collector forest road is, the hike, or a Jeep road, the road is halfway between there in terms of the quality. I strongly recommend do not bring a regular passenger car, an SUV, pickup, horse, that kind of thing. And if it rains, but if you take a passenger car, you've got to crawl. Don't go over the high rocks, go around the high rocks. We have made a cottage industry about the oil can feed. So I'm going to pass this around. Okay, so we hope so much to see you there. There'll be complimentary beer and wine, as well as heavy hors d'oeuvres. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Representative Betts, you're awesome. Thank you for the wonderful invitation, and let's just hope that Mother Nature will cooperate. If it gets very, very rainy by about 3 or 4 o'clock, folks, it will likely be that we will have to back out of it. Just simply because getting there and being in a rainstorm just isn't going to be much fun. If it lifts out, it's one of the beautiful places in Wyoming, and so thank you, bud. Appreciate that very much. Hopefully we'll see you later. Okay, I think we have hopefully, Mr. Kuziak, we've got things fixed on our end tonight. I'm very hopeful, and I would just remind everyone with public comment right now, let's keep our comments as brief as you can because we want to get to some action by the committee. So, Mr. Kuziak, take it away. Welcome.
Good morning, Chairman Landon. Michael Cusick, Executive Director of Wyoming Pathways. We're a not-for-profit that's based in Lander. And for the last 14 years, we've worked on recreational trails on public lands. For the last 7, we've been building them across the state. We've built trails in 7 communities and have 8 more communities in Wyoming that are asking for them or they're.
My sincere apologies again. You're just not coming through on our end very loudly for us to be able to hear. So we're doing a tweak real quick. We're crossing our fingers. My apologies. Hang on just a moment. Michael, we're gonna try it. It's not coming through real loudly, but so do the best you can on your end and we'll listen as carefully as we can. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, committee. Michael Kusick, Executive Director of Wyoming Pathways. We're a nonprofit that builds trail and public lands. And if you can't hear me, I can email it to you. I can email you my comments with a packet.
Okay, so Michael, again, my apologies. We are not going to be able to get you, and we're not going to be able to take public comment at this time. We have some good folks lined up, including yourself, and so I'm sorry we can't get to it. We've got a technical difficulty. We'll try to get back to folks, but if we cannot do so, committee, we're going to take up all of the issues that were discussed so far in the state parks and cultural resources. So we will unfortunately not be able to get to those who have waited patiently, and I am sorry about that. Thank you for being willing to talk to us about state trails. It's an issue that I think is very important, and that's why the committee has it on its ledger this morning. So Brian, I'm looking over at you. From technology, are we going to be able to get this fixed? I'm looking at our good help from PBS. Doesn't look good on the public comment fees. Are you good? Not good. Okay. Again, my apologies to the public who is streaming in this morning. Let's.
We can maybe open some time up tomorrow.
Yeah,
See if we can figure out, we're in August and then we'll have.
And by the way, that's the co-chairman just pointed out, I think that we will be continuing this conversation into our second meeting. I'm absolutely assured of that. And so we'll look forward to everyone's comments. Be sure to incorporate all that if we move some stuff forward to the second meeting, which I think we will. So let's committee, let's talk about what our considerations might be. The co-chairman and I are inclined to move this topic forward to the second meeting. What are the thoughts of committee members? Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I think when you talked about earlier, the education process for both the committee and the legislature, it's been my experience, one of the best opportunities to do that is draft a bill, work an issue. This committee works the bill. We understand the issue. We bring it to the legislature. It'll even be in a budget session. It's oftentimes sets it up for the next year and a much more better refined bill and a better understanding of those issues. And so for that reason, Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to do is propose a bill draft. And that bill draft, and it goes right back to one of our neighbors to the south, what they call the GOCO, the Great Outdoors Colorado money. And the money that they use to fund that program is part of the revenues come through their state lottery. And what I would like to do is propose that we have a bill drafted up that would look at a diversion of some of the, well, I'm going to call it at this point in time, Mr. Chairman, gambling proceeds that come into the state, because we have 4 different revenue streams, from lottery to parimutuel to skill base to online gambling, that the committee at this point in time authorizes a bill draft to look at a diversion of a small percentage of some of those gambling proceeds to fund an outdoor recreation program. And if we want to refine that down to a trails program, Mr. Chairman, we could do that. But I think, again, it's a start. It's identifying an existing source of money. It's something another state already does, and so it's not a novel concept. But that would be my recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hicks, thank you. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Representative Storer and 2 or 3 others. Any comments on that? Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, taking that forward and taking a look at it second meeting, please say go. Oh, Brian, I apologize. Yeah.
My apologies, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick question. is the intent that there would be a portion of each of the 4 funding streams diverted for this? Or I know Senator Hicks mentioned just the lottery specifically. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So Brian, my thought would be, let's perhaps draft a bill with the lottery in mind, and then we do have a select committee working on gambling in general, so we would probably want to have a conversation, a dialogue with those members of that committee. But you want to just start with the lottery? I'm looking at the bringer of the motion. Go ahead, Senator
Mr.
Hicks.
Chairman, given the 4 different sources of money, I think more than anything, we start with one. Obviously, the one that has the most opportunity as far as funding is the online sports wagering. That's going to be upwards of $16 to $19 million coming in through there. But the lottery is a little more modest if that's where we want to start. I'm looking at that. Distribution to the state is 5.4 million a year. If we captured 10% of that, that's 540 million or 540,000. So I think that's a reasonable start. Let's just start with those lottery proceeds and draft it up as a Great Outdoors Wyoming outdoor recreation, and we can refine that as the committee goes forward. But
I agree. And as long as the second agrees with that, let's stick narrowly focused to the lottery. At this point, we can bring an amendment at that time. So, Senator Schuler.
Yeah, before we vote, were you talking about just a percentage of that? Because I know that the cities and towns do get a percentage of that also. So I just wondered if there was we're just going to put an X in there for a certain percentage.
So, Mr. Chair, it's a friendly amendment to my motion. I believe the senator said 10%. So again, the 10% would generate, based on 2024 revenue, about 540,000 a year. So I think that's a modest approach.
I thought that's what you said too, right? The second understood that.
I stand corrected, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Brian, did you get that? Okay. I think we've got the concept, and committee, all in favor of moving that forward to a conversation at the second meeting, please say aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, that passes. And Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to bring a motion to ask for a bill draft that dives into, and we'll lean on Brian a little bit as he's getting kind of the last concept wrapped up, but to talk about if there does need to be a one line change in some of that lodging tax distribution. And if the committee doesn't see this favorably, I completely understand, but I like the concept. And I think if we don't put this arrow in our quiver right now, we're going to run out of time. So it's more conceptual right now. I just think it would be great to have this bill prepared so we can discuss it in August and potentially next interim. But, looking at the revenue source and not looking for a new fee essentially at this time, which, we've been working on, I had meetings about, but really just that with kind of that 1 or 2 sentence change in statute to figure out that allows for once again, a percentage, a local option. It's their decision if that specific local entity, local board wants to do it, but just so it frees up some of their hands and they're not quite as tied, so they can consider another funding source for these impacts that they're creating.
Do I have a second for that motion? Seconded by Senator Boner. Discussion. Does everybody kind of see where the co-chairman's going with that one? Okay. All in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Let's do a show of hands. It's a bill draft that would allow for the use of local funds, local lodging tax funds, and use on a trail system. So the idea would be to bring that forward to the second meeting. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, 4 or 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Okay. Opposed to that notion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that motion fails. Anything further on the trails front? Is there, would the committee like to consider, go ahead, Senator Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we draft a bill that would clarify, if necessary, that state parks can charge a fee specifically for trails on state parks, and then potentially, if it's to go off state parks onto a property that's not owned by state parks, if necessary. Seems like there's, we weren't quite sure whether they already have that authority or not, but perhaps a bill draft to clarify that they can establish a fee on state parks specifically for that purpose.
Do I have a second, just so we can get to discussion on this? Is anybody, seconded by Representative Wolf? Director, does that make sense that we would take a look at that?
Mr. Chairman, let me clarify that just a little bit. Right now, we do not have the ability to charge extra fees for mountain bikes on trails within state parks. Also, by statute, the money received from state parks needs to stay within state parks. So just some information as you move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like that would fit, committee, that it's something we could give the State Parks Agency the ability to do that. Any further discussion? Are you ready for question on that one? All in favor of that bill draft being considered at second meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Okay, let's get that one drafted. Anything further? Do we want to take up the full-blown trail consideration bill? I'm not seeing much feeling in that direction. Okay, anything further, Mr. Co-Chairman or members of the committee? Anything further for consideration at the second meeting? Good morning of discussion. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So question regarding our Wyoming State Museum and the ability to charge entrance fees. Is that something that we would have to draft, giving them the authority, or would we have to actually set that fee?
Representative Campbell, thank you. And that is the next bullet point that we need to get to. And the answer is yes, we do need to give our state museum authorization to be able to do that. So it seems reasonable. If you would like to make that motion, maybe somebody might second that we consider a bill draft.
I would. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Do I have a seconded by Senator Schuler? And that would be to simply address the second bullet point committee and allow for the museum to set a fee structure to hopefully move more in the direction of self-support. Any further discussion on that one? All in favor of moving that to the second committee meeting, please say aye. Any opposed? No? Okay. Brian, hopefully that made sense, that we would work with our deputy director and the museum director to draft something up on that front. Anything further? Thank you, Representative Campbell, for getting to that. Okay, I think we're in good shape, committee, Mr. Co-Chairman. So let's move on to our second topic this morning: industrial siting, wildlife mitigation. Senator Hicks, you can certainly go out front if you'd like, or you can sit right where you're at and help us understand where we were in the session and what brings us to an educational moment this morning on industrial siting.
So, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I'll just sit here rather
Absolutely.
than my back to the audience. So actually, this is a topic that started right here in this building a year ago. The governor hosted a Wyoming Wildlife Summit, and it was very well attended a year ago. That kind of looking at all of the impacts that we have associated with wildlife around the state of Wyoming turned into a discussion with myself, the chief executive, the director of Game and Fish Department, a number of other individuals around and said, what can we do in the state of Wyoming? What are some of the impacts that we're facing and stuff? And while there are many, from diseases to bad winters to industrial development and residential development and stuff. It was like, where do we start? And so part of the discussion is with the rapid industrialization of our very open landscapes around the state of Wyoming what would that look like? And so led me to a discussion as well, let's start looking at the industrial siting process and primarily dealing with the large number of acres that are being put under wind and some of the solar farms and some of that stuff. And what do those impacts look like? And so part of that entire discussion is the reason that we're experiencing this industrialization of our open spaces is because we have world-class resources. We've got world-class wind. We've got world-class sun. We've got world-class, no place else in the United States or they wouldn't be building here, but we also have world-class livestock or wildlife. And so, and my good friend there, livestock too, it's great livestock producers, but it's the same landscape. And so, we had a bill drafted up last year, you're co-chairman, we're co-sponsors of that to start this discussion. Anyway, when we look at this, so what the bill effectively does and what we're conceptually talking about is under those circumstances where you have these large industrial siting projects that have to go through that threshold, these are $500 million plus projects that go through industrial siting. We can probably get the exact number on that from the director, but is to start saying under those circumstances where there is unmitigatable, in other words, there's an impact out there that can't be mitigated. Under those circumstances, what do we do? And part of that concept come back is so when you're a private landowner and you go through this process and you approve, you lease your wind rights, you get surface use agreements through the industrial siting process. Those project proponents of those companies, they compensate those local governments. So part of the tax revenue that comes off of that goes back for fires, county roads, emergency services, all that stuff. So that through that whole process, everybody, whether you're a private landowner or you're a local government entity, is somehow compensated. But one of the impacts, and again, this is focused strictly on those unmitigated impacts. You just can't move a certain facility. It's going to impact a wildlife population. Under those type of scenarios, under our statutory construct, wildlife is the property of the state of Wyoming. And our Game and Fish Department manages that as a trustee or as the public trust for the people of the state of Wyoming. And the discussion was, why is not the people's property being compensated for unmitigated impacts? Many times, the agencies, they do submit comments. The director can go through on all of these processes, but there's no provision that comes back and says, the recommendations. This is how you minimize the impacts or you mitigate the impact. You move it here, you do it there, you siting, all of that stuff's done. We're not talking about that. We're talking about on those rare occasions that you have minerals only are located in one place. You know, optimal wind towers are only located in one place. So oftentimes those correspond with those areas that are absolutely critical for wildlife. And you just can't move the facility. You can't move a mine. You can't relocate the roads. And so under those scenarios, how are we gonna compensate the people of the state of Wyoming for their loss of property? And so that's where this bill draft looks at. So those uncompensated, unmitigated, cannot mitigate it, would come back and we would provide a compensatory mitigation fund. And so compensatory mitigation by its very nature says is if you can't mitigate it on site, then we go off site and mitigate this. And this would provide the funding to do some of this off-site compensatory mitigation for that. And so that's kind of the introductory topic, but it really comes down to what do we value as a society. And the vast majority of the people that reside in this state have a great appreciation for the wildlife in the state. In fact, many of us live here for the open spaces and the wildlife, and we are stewards. And it's our generation that will be judged as to whether we did a really good job of conserving this, at the same time facilitating the opportunity for the private sector and business to move forward. But let's make sure we do everything we can in our generation to make sure when there is absolutely unmitigatable impacts, that we provide that opportunity for compensatory mitigation to enhance or protect that wildlife resource in other areas or adjacent areas of the state. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's the bill draft. What it accomplishes to do is the structural component of that would allow the Game and Fish Department, while they comment on these already and they make recommendations, if they identify through this process that there's just something, and so think of a solar farm. When you cover 5,000 acres with solar panels, you're going to have an impact that just can't be mitigated on site. And under the scenario like that, the department will do an analysis. They will make a request for X number of dollars to come back to be used for the purposes of compensatory mitigation. AK could be habitat improvements, could be term conservation easements, could be perpetual conservation easements. But at some point in time, what we're saying is if you can't mitigate this by siting or location or operation, then there would be a request by the department to the Industrial Siting Council that would say, look, we think this is the associated impacts. We think this is a reasonable fee, that we could go out and do some compensatory mitigation to offset those impacts someplace else. That request would then go to the Industrial Siting Council, and then they would award those funds through that process, the normal existing process. And that's really the only difference now is the department can make recommendations, but they're not enforceable if a company decides not to do that. But in the case of this scenario, there is now a provision that says they can request funds for these unmitigated impacts. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's the concept right now, is to introduce it to the committee.
Okay, Senator Hicks, thank you. Appreciate your comments and your description of why this topic was actually supported by the committee. This is an interim topic to educate ourselves on. And, you know, it was fascinating. We were at the summit this year in this very room 2 or 3 weeks ago. We came up to the governor's and we sat there and we heard from the director of one of our national parks. And it was fascinating when he explained in the surveys of all the thousands of people that visit that park, the assumption was we're here to see those grand mountains. That's not it. People are here to see the wildlife. That's what they're here to see. And so anyway, it's an appropriate topic for us to do everything we can to get our arms around. The co-chairman and I felt pretty strongly that this is a good discussion for our committee to have and get as good an understanding over the next couple of years as we can. But we've got agency folks here. I want to get to them. Director Parfit is not able to be here, but I would invite EEQ to come forward. We do have our administrator here today. Wonderful. We look forward to that. Thank you for being here. Please state your name and for the record and welcome.
Chairman Landon, committee members, thank you for having me today. I'm Jenny Staben, the Administrator of Industrial Siting at DEQ. Director Parfit did entrust with me to be here today to speak with you, and also impressed upon me the importance of brevity and clarity. So I will try to talk significantly less than I did during legislative session. I have been coached. I thought I would start today by just walking through the industrial siting process, break it down into 5 steps, then explain to the committee how each of those steps works, and also the 4 different parties that can be involved in an industrial siting permit proceeding. Please interrupt me with questions as they come to your mind. But to break it down very simply, the industrial siting process is a very unique permit to DEQ. Your typical DEQ permit goes through DEQ itself, and the divisions make the determination on the permit. In industrial siting, it is not a DEQ permit. It is the Industrial Siting Council's permit. It is a council made of 7 citizens that are appointed by our governor and confirmed by the Senate. Those 7 people, the actual committee, they decide whether to grant or deny a permit and the conditions to be on that permit. Now, there are 5 steps, like I said, to industrial siting. The first step would be the pre-application period. The pre-application is, and I'm going to review the steps and then go through them in more detail. But during the pre-application period, a project proponent contacts the division and they start receiving the information required to build their industrial siting application. In this time period, they are also expected to contact the other 19 state agencies that will be reviewing the application and providing information within that application. The next step is the application itself. Industrial siting permit applications are typically 1,500 to 2,000 pages. They include a number of studies, mitigation plans. They also state agency concerns, as well as agencies' solutions, agreements, and commitments that permit application has made to those agencies to resolve their concerns. The third step of the application process, my division receives an application, we notify local governments of the application, as well as all the agencies and affected landowners. The third step I like to call the comment and condition request period. My division, we accept and we request comments from the 19 state agencies who have been working with the project proponent, both in the pre-application phase and in getting information into that application. What is critical in this comment period is that those state agencies inform the division, my division, of any concerns they have on the application, any plans or promises within that application that they've agreed to, and also any recommendations for permit conditions. The next phase is the hearing. Now, when I say that I'm so sorry about the microphone. When I say the Industrial Siting Council determines the permit, that permit is determined in a contested case hearing. So the hearing itself must follow the rules of civil procedure and the Administrative Procedures Act. It is not your basic quarterly meeting. The council also has four quarterly, hence the name. The council also has quarterly meetings throughout the year, but a hearing determination itself is made during a contested case proceeding. I like to think of contested case proceedings as a little bit of the formalization of a jury trial, but with no rules of evidence, and pretty much anyone can make a comment. But the presentation of those comments has a few rules attached to it. And then the fifth part of an industrial siting permit is the monitoring phase, after the permit has been granted. My division is charged with monitoring those permits. And I think it's important to note that the Industrial Siting Council's jurisdiction and permit is for the entire life of the project, all the way through reclamation and decommissioning. Essentially, the Industrial Siting Council hosts an administrative hearing, and based on all of the facts that they receive at that hearing, They determine whether or not to grant the permit and what conditions to put on the permit. Recommendations are forwarded to them from all of the 19 state agencies, affected landowners, and affected local governments. And there are other parties which I will also talk about. But in order, and I think the key for folks to know is that in order for the Industrial Siting Council to grant a permit, based on the facts provided to them, they have to find that the permittee and the project itself complies with applicable law. The project itself does not pose a threat of serious injury, environmental, or social economic conditions, nor pose a serious threat of serious injury, to inhabitants of the affected area. The council also has to have the facts in front of them to make the legal ruling and decision that the facility does not substantially impair health, safety, or welfare to the inhabitants, and that the applicant has financial resources to decommission and reclaim the property when the project is no longer in operation. Now, in industrial siting, this is an important piece because industrial siting projects are typically in operation anywhere from 25 to 50 years. So it really is a forward-looking permit. Again, this is also why it's important that the council does maintain jurisdiction over that project through the entire life of the project. Now, to back up a little, I'd like to just list some details from the statutes that you do have at hand and how they apply, with the focus being on wildlife and wildlife mitigation today, to give you an idea of the current process. Again, please, I'm very open to questions and I love to talk. So the very first step, we look back at that pre-application period. When a project proponent, future applicant, contacts my office, they receive a packet of information that my division has designed and put together, which basically says, here are all of the state agencies. You are expected to engage with them during this pre-application period. Now, what I'm about to list off from the statute does apply to game and fish, and some of it is a bit more specifically. This is why I'm saying it applies to game and fish, because we're here today to talk about wildlife. And in this industrial siting process, my division is charged with receiving information from all 19 state agencies. When it comes to the hearing, my division is charged with representing those state agencies at the actual hearing and presenting that information to the council. So during the pre-application phase, to back up, applicants are expected to engage with the 19 agencies. Those agencies are the applicant, the information they need to receive from those agencies also needs to be provided in the application itself. That information by statute includes an explanation of how and why they determine their site location, studies of environmental impact, procedures to avoid impacts to wildlife, evaluation of those potential impacts to, in this case, it would be wildlife, and plans or proposals to alleviate impacts to wildlife. Now, again, this list applies to all the other state agencies and what their expertise is. My division and the council relies on the expertise of each state agency. My division, industrial siting, we're just the administrative arm to the council. My staff are economic analysts. So when it comes to historic preservation, workforce services, dust control, health concerns, that sort of thing, my division, we rely on the information provided to us by the agencies, and we forward that information to the council. Also, we rely on the project working with those agencies to be able to identify any required studies that the agencies request, procedures to avoid any impacts, potential impacts, likely impacts, direct impacts, and how to alleviate those. That is all information that is determined during pre-application and put into the application process. Specifically related to wildlife, my division, when we review an application, we look to and expect the application to include the work done with the agency charged with terrestrial and aquatic wildlife and any threatened, endangered, or species of concern. So your typical application can take anywhere from 1 year to 2 years to create, and it involves a lot of information gathering, negotiating, and identifying the issues and how to mitigate them. Now, one other part of this pre-application process is every agency is free to negotiate with the project proponent any outside or private agreement. So if there isn't, so when you come to the next phase, you have all the pre-application conversations, you have all this information, it goes into an application. All the agencies and local governments and affected landowners are notified of the project application. Once the division gets an application, we have to hold the hearing within 90 days this year, and then within 120 days starting next year. So it is a tighter time frame. My division reviews the application to make sure that everything I've listed to you during the pre-application phase is in that application. The application notice serves to notify the agencies that the application is available for their review. Within 60 days of that application being delivered to my office, we receive comments as well as recommendation from all those state agencies. What happens in that comment and recommendation period are two things. Number one, the agencies inform us of anything they would like. In other words, they can inform us of whether they're having a positive or negative relationship with the project proponent. They also identify any concerns they have that have either been addressed, items that have been agreed to, or continuing concerns that they have on the project. Those 19 agencies also let us know very specifically what they would like as a permit condition on those permits. Now, to be honest with you, if I'm reviewing comments from an agency and they don't literally say, we request the following permit condition, then I call that agency and I say, what do you want your permit condition to be? A great example is YDOT. They are very active in this process. They typically give me a long list of bullet points, which I call and I say, okay, how can we make these 20 bullet points into permit conditions? And so it is a very integrated process. Then the division, because of the industrial site, my division represents the 19 state agencies, we put together the conditions and we forward all the comments, all the recommendations to the council for their review. Now remember, this is a contested case proceeding. We organize everything as an exhibit and provide all the information we have received to the council for their review because it is the council's permit and because they are charged with the duty of evaluating all the facts presented to them so they can then support their legal determination of whether to grant or deny a permit or what conditions go on that permit. This brings me to the next step. We've done pre-application, application comments. The next step is the hearing itself. Now, at a hearing, the Industrial Siting Division, like I said, we are a party on the permit and we represent the interests of the state. Those interests being of an agent of the 19 state agencies. At that permit hearing, we also have the project proponent, the applicant, who puts on their own evidence to demonstrate and to answer any of the questions the council has regarding the permit, whether to grant it, deny it, or if they disagree with a permit condition that my division has put forward based on the information we received from the 19 state agencies. Does anyone have any questions so far? Because I feel like I'm really pushing a lot of information.
Any questions, committee? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one, as you're going along, I started thinking about just the makeup of the council itself. And I know the Senate, we do vote to move them forward. I just can't remember what the makeup is. Do you have someone in there that is somewhat diverse in terms of wildlife? I mean, I imagine you have a number of people on that council that represent a number of different things, but do you have someone that's a wildlife expert?
What's the makeup, Administrator?
Chairman Landon, Senator Schuler. The makeup, politically, it is a mix of Republican and Democrat. Now, as far as my 7 members, I can describe to you briefly what skills they have to be on the council. 2 of the council members are on what I would say consulting firms for large businesses, reclamation, decommissioning. I have 1 council member who is very interested in vegetation, management of cheatgrass, that sort of thing. Our council also has 2 attorneys that have a very strong knowledge in the law and interest. I have a council member, quite frankly, Jim Miller, who just got renewed, and I think he's been on the council for almost 20 years, and he has a lot of history there. I also have a council member who's very active at the county commission level and understands the interests and needs, because we do have the impact assistance portion of our meetings. One thing I can say is at this point in time, the council is very receptive to the information, the comments, and the concerns of agencies as well as landowners and the local governments.
Thank you.
Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. When you talk about the landowner, what if it is the federal government that owns the land, if it's BLM property or whatever?
Chairman Landon, Senator Jones, there's a lot to say about when the landowner is the federal government. Now, when they are the federal government, then the project must go through a complete NEPA review. It typically extends the project timelines. Essentially, typically the projects come to get their industrial siting permit first. Then it goes through the NEPA review, the EA, and what else is required by the federal government. Now, in going through that NEPA process, projects, a perfect example would be a turbine project, are typically required, move turbines, change siting, and that sort of thing. Any change to the information provided in the application, if on the ground any of that needs to change, it also includes financial resources, who owns the project, the business end. It also includes on the ground, any turbines that have to be moved. Typically, a lot of the projects right now are using fewer turbines because as they've gotten closer to the construction, technology's changed. But any change from the application or the information given to the council after a permit's been granted, the permittee has to come in and amend that permit and get the council's permission to make that change.
Further questions? Ms. David, thank you. You're doing great. Please.
Landon, thank you. If you don't mind, I just continue. I'll be quick. Just a few more steps.
You're in good shape. Keep going. Let's get you finished up and then we'll have further questions perhaps, but appreciate your time. So keep going.
Thank you, sir. In the 5th step, which is the hearing itself, because the division represents the agencies cannot enter as a party on the permit. However, if agencies have discovered an issue or if agencies don't believe that the proposed permit conditions cover their needs, the agencies can write limited appearance statements, which are provided to the council, and those agencies can have representatives at the hearing who may be called on by the council to further describe their requests, concerns, or something like that. in any issue like that. Now, industrial siting proceedings, they are not a public meeting. They are a contested case hearing. So public comments are not taken in the sense of testimony to the council itself. Any concerned citizen can come either to the hearing or beforehand, email the division a written limited appearance statement. So a writing of their concerns on the permit. I also want to highlight other parties to the permit other than you have your agency represented through the industrial siting division. You have the project representatives, and then you have local governments for impact assistance. But what is important to know today is that any affected landowner can also be a party on the permit and can request any of their concerns, either to their land, frankly, anything that they are concerned about, they can, and permit conditions, they can make those requests specifically to the council for the council to consider. By statute, affected landowners are given the same deference as agencies. They can become a party, and like I said, they can provide written or oral, written comment or oral argument. This is also true for any nonprofit organization in Wyoming that has a Wyoming chapter. So if there is a nonprofit organization, and since we're talking about wildlife today, our nonprofit organizations that have concerns about wildlife and the environment can become a party on the permit. They can testify at the hearing, which would be having an open back and forth dialogue with the council. If they choose not to become a party, then they can always submit a limited appearance statement. If they believe any kind of wildlife issue has not been fully developed or concerned in the application, or if they would like to make a request for permit condition, they can do all of that as a party. Or if they have a comment they would like to provide. The fifth part is what I would say is monitoring, which happens after a permit is granted. Monitoring through the first year of operation, the permittee must, provide very structured reports to the division for our review. But like I said, that permit goes through the life of the project. What also goes through the life of the project is the bond and financial requirements for that project. In all industrial siting projects, except mining projects, all bonding goes through the Land Quality Division of DEQ. But for all the renewable projects or other projects within the Industrial Siting Council's jurisdiction, of which a permit is granted, the Industrial Siting Council requires a bond. That bond amount, enough facts in the application need to be provided that the council is able to determine whether the bond amount is adequate or not. The bond by statute is reviewed. I just lied to you. I don't know if it's by statute, but I know it's in my permit conditions, so they have to do it. The bond is reviewed every 5 years. We typically look for that to increase with inflation and general costs.
Ms. Staben, thank you. You got anything to finish up with?
I just have a couple of comments.
Let's go quickly.
And they will go fast.
The morning is getting away from us, so.
That's fair.
Thank you.
The Industrial Siting Council has jurisdiction over any facility with an estimated construction cost of $290 million or more, turbine facilities with 20 or more turbines, solar facilities that will create 30 megawatts of power or disturb 100 acres or more. As far as what can be asked or requested of the council, there really is no limit. If an agency has a request or concern, they can make that request. The key is for any agency, landowner, and honestly, even local governments to make a request. If they cite an issue, an impact caused by the project, they need to explain the nexus. What they need to connect the project to that impact. They need to explain those facts to the council, and then they can make their request. There's really no limit or hindrance on what can and can't be asked for. But there does need to be a demonstration factually that it is the project causing the issue. Whether it's impact assistance, whether it's environmental, health, any of those other concerns. I've heard rumors, or I've heard folks say that recommendations are not enforceable. A recommendation is carried forward to the council based on the information provided in the application, the information provided in the agency comment, the information provided at the hearing, the information in limited appearance statement, public comments, any facts given to the council for their evaluation. That determines what becomes a permit condition. That determines when that makes a recommendation into an enforceable requirement of a permit. Violating the permit is a fine of $10,000 a day. And I will leave it there.
Thank you, Ms. David. You did great. Committee, this is a topic, as you can tell, we could spend the next 2 days on industrial siding. And we all know that. That was a great 30,000-foot overview of a very extensive process that takes place, and appreciate all the work you do. Any questions for our administrator, who I think did a great job this morning? Thank you, and we reserve the right to maybe ask a question a little bit later if something comes up, okay? If you can stick around for a few minutes. I want to get to our game and fish folks, and then we'll move on from there. Our time is getting away from us today, and we had a semi-hard stop coming up, but we'll push it to about 12:30, and then the committee does have to stop and get to some other things. So let's try to chop through. And Director, good to see you. Good morning.
Good to see you, Chairman, committee members, Angie Bruce, Game and Fish Director. I'll just be brief, touch on a few things, and then just open it up for any questions. The Industrial Siting Council did a great job explaining the process. So just a little bit more on our role in that process. We do wildlife environmental reviews. We have an entire separate section of the director's office that does that. About 500 to 700 a year. So we do a lot. With the Industrial Siting Council in the last 10 years, we've done 27 projects, to give you some perspective. Those 27 projects, our staff spent approximately 325 hours on each one of them. So we're very aggressive working with these proponents to try to mitigate impacts to wildlife. Our job is not to stop development in this state. Our job is simply to work with those who come to us to try to find ways to develop that have the least impact on fish and wildlife. We're currently working with 19 different projects. That's pretty normal, between 15 and 20 a year. A lot of those don't actually go to the development stage. There's some areas of the state. I think we've worked with 4 or 5 different proponents on a wind project that has just never kind of come to development. So they come and go pretty rapidly, to give you some idea of our work. Now, Jenny did a great job of explaining how that process works and what our recommendations to the Industrial Siting Council might look like. And there is that line in there, that plans and proposals to alleviate impacts. What does that look like? We're really the technical expertise that help these industries outline that. However, this tool or this bill, if it were to go forward, kind of adds some clarity. As like Senator Hicks said, a mitigation option offsite. Give you some perspective. Most proponents, when they come to us, we want them to come to us really, really early, because that's when we can have the most impact. But usually when they come to us, they've already had their site picked. So we're not saying go shift it 10 miles this way. They pretty much have all these other factors that go into site selection. We'd really like to help impact where that site goes, but it's always not the case. So what we're talking about is the micro siting within that. For instance, they may come and say, this 10,000 acres, we plan to put up 100 wind turbines. So within that 10,000 acres, we work with them to avoid and mitigate as many wildlife impacts as possible by shifting those turbines and infrastructure, roads, everything associated with that project around in the area. And then really hone in on what is needed to understand those impacts. So we'll often ask them to do some monitoring. So over the years, we can see if that they are having an impact, say, to migratory birds, to sage grouse, whatever that concern might be in the area. So oftentimes we can minimize and avoid a lot. But to say that we mitigate fully probably isn't a correct statement, because we do know that infrastructure on the landscape is going to have impacts. What we really do is try to prioritize our important habitats, our species of concern, and really focus on those and having the least amount of impact. This bill or this proposal would allow for some additional flexibility to do some of that off-site and not just on-site, because there are circumstances when that can't happen. And then the one nuance that we haven't brought up today yet is this difference between where that is located. To date, most solar and wind in the state has occurred on private land. That is just because we all know the reality of the NEPA process and how long it takes to get through. So when it occurs on public land, we often have other things in place that influence the amount of mitigation that is done. So mitigation on BLM land looks a lot different than it does on private land and state lands. So I think the one area here is on private lands. We're very cognizant that these projects on private lands, there's not a lot of other things that say this is what you have to mitigate for. So there's quite a bit of difference between all those things in play on private versus public to consider. And then just the last thing to leave you with is we have like a very extensive process. We work extremely closely with Industrial Siting Council through all of these. And again, this is another tool you could add into the mix. There is that ability, like Jenny talked about, for them to mitigate now and to require that through the Industrial Siting Council. This would maybe just help clarify an additional opportunity there.
Director, thank you. Well stated. Committee, any questions at this time for the Director of Game and Fish? Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on staffing. So when you said you have 325 hours on each project, what's the staffing needs? Because we're seeing more and more of these projects. Are they going to level out? Are they going to keep coming at us?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead,
Representative Connolly. Yeah, it kind of comes in waves. You know, we saw waves with the tax incentive on solar and wind several years ago. So we saw a huge flood of proponents coming to the state. So it kind of comes and goes, definitely. I anticipate there probably will be less projects over the next 3 or 4 years to do with wind and solar. And yeah, it is a strain on our staff. Again, we're there just to provide this technical assistance, what they need to meet those obligations of the Industrial Siting Council permit. And we use a variety of different ways. We have, like I said, a separate division to do it, a separate section, and then they use our field expertise as well. So we kind of pull in people, extra people when we need to get the best information.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
Real quick, I would concur on the wind and solar, but I think we're going to see a significant ramp up, particularly for critical minerals. And a lot of those you've just been watching the newspaper again. A lot of that's on private land. And so I would anticipate we're going to see a number of those coming out. So, you know, one of the things that, and depending on what the committee decides to do with this, I do think there at some point in time, if we get into these, if the department's then identifying potential compensatory mitigation stuff, there may be a desire of the committee or somebody to say, look, for these extra costs associated with the department, they could recoup a small percentage of that associated with additional workload through those industrial siting process fees. So it's just another if we get that far.
No, I think that's a good point, Senator, and that was on my mind are we satisfied that mitigation efforts director take care of the lifetime of the impact to our department, for example? And is anything ever set aside in perpetuity to help? In other words, do we even consider something like a sinking fund that can assist in some of these projects will take department time from now on? Does that make sense?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, they do. They're continuous, like Jenny said, they're really long projects, and the companies are often doing monitoring. They bring it back. We review their monitoring plan, provide them with advice every year. And also the companies, most of them, when it comes to wind and solar and some of the others, they're outside the state. They're not our normal ones that we work with really well, oil and gas, that we have years with. So it actually takes a lot of effort to get them up to speed with Wyoming's processes. Luckily, they're starting to hire a lot of local consultants, which are used to working with us. So that is helping. But just getting them understanding. And then when we talk about this stuff, a lot of the companies don't know what to do. They don't know what that mitigation is. They don't know how to minimize impacts. I would love it if they said, we've analyzed this, here's our proposal. But it doesn't work that way. They come to us and like, what should we do? So we're proposing back to them. So it's a lot of back and forth, which takes a lot of staff time. And just continuous, like you said, over the years. It just builds, it doesn't get less, it just gets more.
Thank you, Director. Anything else? Representative, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, let's just use one of the other ones. Easy enough to do.
Thank you, Director. Again, kind of off of some discussion we've already had about the expansion of industry coming to Wyoming and that balance and making sure that we have the stewardship of the wildlife and the people in the state's property rights. As Director Bruce had just brought up, to make sure that we have impartial laws and regulations and mitigation, and that they should be based on scientific evidence and sound management practices for wildlife. I think that's so important. And I want to make sure that we're applying without bias and discrimination to all industries. It takes all. It's not an or statement, it's an and statement. And we just, for the future of Wyoming's diversity and our sustainability. So I think we need to keep that in line when we're bringing up these new laws and regulations.
Okay, and I think the question in there was, don't you think so, Director?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I think maybe I'll imply a little bit about what she was talking about is, so Industrial Siting Council, you heard Jenny talk about what type of projects. And we also know there's a lot of energy occurring across the state. So this is very specific. I can tell you which ones are those ones we're working on now to give you some perspective. We have 7 wind energy, 5 combination of wind and solar. That seems to be the new thing where they're combo. 4 solar, 1 transmission line, 1 carbon sequestration, and 1 pump storage.
Okay, thank you for that, Director. So we're going to keep moving, committee. Go ahead. I'll get to a couple of questions, but I'm just going to remind everyone we need to chop right along. So go ahead, Senator Hitch.
Chairman, just really quick, because when we went through the process and we said, well, the federal lands, but I want to make everybody sure, unless they've changed the CEQ, Council of Environmental Quality, has changed the rules. When you do one of these projects and the department makes a recommendation and the federal government has a little more authority to enforce those recommendations, even now under CEQ guidelines, unless they've changed recently, which I don't believe they have, the federal government cannot require compensatory mitigation. In other words, just because you have an impact here, you can't go over here 22 miles and do something over here. It's voluntary. They encourage compensatory mitigation. It's encouraged, but it's not mandatory, and they can enforce it. And that's the way it's been. A couple of years since I went through that process, but even again, this would provide some clarification, some opportunity to get that compensatory mitigation out there. We're even on the federal projects,
Okay.
voluntary by the operator.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Jones?
Mr. Chairman, Director Bruce, I just had a question. There's a solar farm right outside of Green River. And I know it has been real detrimental to wildlife in our area. I think most importantly, antelope. Can you maybe give some insight on that and what's happening with it?
Yeah,
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Chairman, Senator, thank you for bringing that up because that was the first one developed in the state. That was also pre-industrial siting council permit. So that one went through before we had this process. No state permit, however, it's on BLM land. We spoke up pretty loud. I think we still have records of our letters. The difference at that point, though, is that we had best biological opinion, which is really good to have. Our local experts said this will be problematic. However, our federal partners did not listen to us and they issued the permit and it went forward. However, one thing we were able to get, so I look at this as a win, like it is very detrimental, but what came out of that is the awareness of the possible effects that solar can have, especially on big game. We saw, I think it was 2 winters later, over 1,000 antelope on the road because of that blockage that created. When you put up a solar farm, there's a 6-foot high perimeter fence required. Again, we anticipated this, but unfortunately it became reality. And therefore things like industrial siting council permit, the legislators enacted. So again, we've got measures in place now, which is good. Since then, BLM has actually entertained several other in the area. And some of them did not get selected to proceed forward because of our comments. When we could not get that one modified. However, we did get the requirement in the BLM NEPA to do a monitoring research project on it. So Dr. Hall Sawyer monitored the antelope to show the effect of that solar project, which gave us valuable wildlife information that we now use in these reviews going forward.
It's tougher to proact than it is to react. And we find that out as legislators, don't we? Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned our federal partners, so I'm curious if you can maybe share with the committee the impact that federal regulations has on especially wind development when it comes to protecting birds. It seems like I remember we worked an issue a few years ago dealing with wind turbine encroachment upon nuclear launch facilities. And it turns out the restrictions are far more significant for bird nests than a nuclear missile silo. And so could you maybe go over that? Because I think it's important for the community to understand the impact that wildlife mitigation has on these projects, not because of the state of Wyoming, but because of federal requirements to the point where you cannot develop within I believe it's a 1-mile radius. But Director, could you just share your knowledge on that? So
Yeah,
You
Mr.
could
Chairman.
please touch on that, but then we're going to try to move on because we
Yeah.
have some other folks who want to weigh in. So
Try to be really quick. When it comes to the migratory species, we allow the Fish and Wildlife Service to take the lead on that. And depending on what administration we're at, that seems to vary what that looks like. But they do have nest buffers in place, so how close that you can develop next to those. Again, we stay out of that because it is the Fish and Wildlife Service, but that does greatly impact the siting of a lot of infrastructure. We saw some ramifications to that in the current Rock Springs RNP that were pretty critical and maybe will be getting modified here coming up. But we really, overall, we really try to work with the proponent in the infrastructure and look at our critical species. Again, you know, when people say, and I was having this great conversation with Cindy back there a little bit, is they already mitigate for everything. And it's like, well, technically, you know, we manage for 800 species in this state. We can't say that there isn't impact on any of them. So we need to focus. We need to focus on our priority habitats, our critical species, and really hone in on those. And so that we're not making it impossible to develop.
Director, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate you being here. So committee, just a little housekeeping. We are running short of time to be able to do with the rest of the day what we have planned. And so the co-chairman and I were visiting about this. This is a topic of interest, and it's an educational effort on behalf of our committee. I think I represent the co-chairman's sentiments on this too. We're inclined to continue understanding this issue in the next meeting, and we can certainly carry this forward. That's my inclination. I'm looking at a couple of former chairmen of committees, but it feels like this could be carried forward. And I don't want to eliminate the ability for some public comment today, but we're not going to get to everyone's comment today. We can't. I'm looking at some folks who are streaming in. There are numerous folks who want to testify on this topic, and we simply did not provide that kind of time. I'm kind of waffling a little bit, committee, as to how much we take, but
Mr. Chairman, could I make a motion that we just continue this topic at the next meeting of the TRW instead of, to get to your point that this, I think we've got 2 more meetings coming up, that we've got time at the next meeting if the committee is so inclined to bring something up. But I do think it's important that we give all the public the opportunity to comment that wants to.
Okay, let's see if we get a second for the motion to just carry this over to the next meeting. Seconded by a couple of representatives, Campbell. Thank you for that. Now, discussion, Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given Management Council has limited the number of meetings, I guess my concern is how are we going to divvy up those days? Because if we have 2 days for the next meeting, that doesn't necessarily give us an opportunity. If we have one day for the next meeting and 1 day for a third meeting, then maybe we could do that, but that limits us from being able to motion a bill draft and have time to review it and look at it. It looks like Brian Fuller wants to talk to me.
So, Representative, that the co-chairman and I will take that up, and we do have the ability to go to Management Council and request another day if it's needed, and I think it probably looks that way. But good point made. The motion is simply that we will carry this over, committee, and that compels me. Senator Schuler.
Okay, never mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. I think we need to carry it over. However, I would say that
since we do have that motion on the floor regarding the motion, Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Minerals Committee has looked at this topic as well, and maybe Brian could provide us some of the information on that, but Minerals has looked at this previously.
Thank you, Senator Jones. They have, and that committee is very well versed on this topic, many of them. And you know, how that fits into whether or not we would want to have an additional day to meet with them. That's a possibility. We could consider that as your chairman, but we'll talk about that. Brian, any thoughts on that front?
Yep. So Mr. Chairman, I guess the first thought is the way that you and the co-chairman have structured this interim in light of Management Council's directive is the second meeting will be 1 day, and then there will be a separate third meeting scheduled that's only 1 day. So there would be time still at the second meeting if the committee were so inclined to request a bill draft for the final meeting. Mr. Chairman, in terms of what Minerals has done in the past, there was some discussion, consideration of changing how impact assistance payments would be made. That was a topic previously discussed, at least in terms of this specific and what I would call a pretty discrete issue of a process for providing some sort of mitigation, some sort of financial mitigation specifically related to wildlife. That's that specific issue is one that minerals didn't cover. Minerals, the discussion at minerals was much broader about impact assistance payments in general.
That's very helpful, Brian. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hicks. go
Just
ahead.
so, and as you was the co-chair, were co-sponsors on a bill that I brought last year. It was assigned to the Minerals Committee. It went to the Senate Minerals. We looked at that. At that point in time, it just wasn't ready for prime time. And so I asked the Minerals Committee to just lay that bill back and bring it forward as a interim topic and try to get it here where, again, I think Brian alluded, this is very discreet within our purview, not necessarily the impact assistance payment. So I think that may be what Senator Jones was referring to.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for the input on this motion. I'm inclined to take a vote if you're ready. All those in favor of continuing this topic conversation at the next meeting, please say aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, we've got that covered. Now I want to get to folks who have spent their time to get here and want to testify on this issue. Please feel welcome to do it. We've got very important folks online. I'm just very concerned that we have the kind of time it's going to take to get to those folks. I want to take care of the people who have made the trip here. So let's try to do that. Good morning, good afternoon, I guess. We are in the afternoon, so good afternoon, Cindy. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Cindy Delancey. I'm here on behalf of American Clean Power Association. Also, my colleague Jeff Pope, who is a lawyer that handles primarily, his entire practice is devoted to industrial siting. He was one of those people that unfortunately, due to the technical difficulties, he's on there, but I don't think he can talk. So he might be one of those carryover people. So there is a handout being.
He could give you hand signals. I mean, if there's something like that, he could do.
Yeah, there is a handout being presented, but I think we'll probably save that full discussion, especially in light of the time and trying to be courteous to the other members in the room, Mr. Chairman, that you need to squeeze in before the committee recesses for your other activities planned. I just really wanted to make just a couple kind of legal component discussions building on some of the testimony that we heard from Director Staben as well as Director Bruce. So in Wyoming, we have our cake and we eat it too. We are an energy powerhouse, but we have our world-class wildlife and world-class environment. And that is a value that we all hold near and dear. So, whether it's recreationalists, landowners, industrial developers, I think that there's a lot of commonality that we want to maintain that ability to have world-class, all the above options. So knowing that, that is sort of something that is culturally ingrained upon us, legislators before this group really held that in trust. And what I mean by that is the law specifically contemplates what Senator Hicks articulated. Under the current Industrial Siting Act, unmitigated impacts is defined. And that definition is identified impacts that are not minimized by limiting the magnitude or the impact or not compensated by replacing or providing substitute resources or supplemental environmental projects. So I just really asked this committee, we have this provision already in statute. The council is not finding that there are unmitigated impacts in these projects because they're following the law. And that is what the law that Dr. Staben outlined about this enormous rigor on the front of these developments or, developmental opportunities that are being analyzed by our technical experts at the state level. The reason that we don't have unmitigated impacts and that they're very unlikely is because, again, like going through that very, very rigorous process in the beginning is where you get to the backside of not needing these things that are left unmitigated or open questions on. The permit process is for the developers that want to come and help expand and diversify our economy. Just to be able to go through this process is $3 to $5 million. So I just really leave this committee with the notion that these are very robust, very lengthy, very thorough. We all want to make sure that we get these projects right. But we also have to, give due regard to the role of the council. They're the ones with the thumb on the scale to determine if these projects should move forward or not. And by trying to jump in front of them, by taking that power away from them, I think it's just something that we need to be cognizant of, that we don't undermine the work of the Industrial Siting Council that has a high degree of level of expertise to be able to handle the analysis and the recommendations coming from our state technical experts. Now, we did hear this discussion over the interim. There was not an appetite from the Minerals Committee to move that discussion onward. As Senator Hicks articulated, he did request that the bill be withdrawn. But going back to Senate File 134, and in light of the senator's comments this morning, that bill put the burden and fee on the developer, not come through industrial siting impact assistance. So when the reference was made to establishing fees, I think it would be essential for industry to have a better understanding of where the source of these fees are going to come from and how these fees are handled. Because if there is additional burdens being put on developers in this already complex and expensive process, that's certainly going to be a topic of discussion for industry. If the goal is to chip away at some of the local impact assistance to divert to these types of expenses from local government impacts coming from the state, that I'm sure the local governments will want to chime in on this. So I just kind of want to put that out there, that our process is like no other process in the country. We really need to get this right for Wyoming, and we do. And we have people that have worked very hard on developing that right balance of how we protect our resources that are owned by the state of Wyoming and entrusted others on behalf of its citizens, but also trying to maintain our competitive edge and how we can continue to grow our economy and keep, a lot of these projects are a way for our ranches to stay whole. Ranching doesn't pencil out very much without other, levels of diversification to be able to come and have revenue streams, keep the ranches in the family for multiple generations. These projects become that ability. And if we start continuing to, add additional bureaucratic costs, hurdles, it makes Wyoming less competitive than our neighbors. I have the fortune to work on a lot of these projects all day long, and I can tell you that our neighbors to the west, Utah, are doing a pretty dang good job at stealing projects that once were contemplated for Wyoming. So I guess in closing, Mr. Chairman, I just ask as this discussion continues to move forward, to really heed the words of Director Bruce and Director Staben, to try to find that balance to make sure that we are able to continue to grow and diversify and create jobs and grow an economy for our children to be able to remain in Wyoming without completely stopping things and just utilizing the tools that already exist in the law. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Delancey. Appreciate it. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Mr. Brown, take it away.
Mr. Chairman, I realize time is short. I'll be extremely brief. I don't know that there's ever been another time that I've worn both hats that I represent in one committee. But Chris Brown representing Powering Up Wyoming. We are a Wyoming organization that supports wind, solar, and storage alongside our legacy energy industries, with the understanding that as demand continues to increase, we will need all available resources to meet that demand. Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to repeat the great testimony that we've heard previously. Our only concern with this topic is the potential for uncertainty. As Ms. Delancey alluded to, Wyoming isn't the only state that's great at energy. The states around us compete for these projects and these companies that are investing hundreds of millions of dollars into the state. As Dr. Staben alluded, the siting process is robust and extensive already, up to 2 years to get an application put together. My understanding is between 1,000 and 1,500 pages, with multiple opportunities for agencies to weigh in, give recommendations, and then be monitored every 5 years throughout the life of that project. I respect the fine line you all are walking because we are a wildlife state. We are an energy state. And Mr. Chairman, I would just submit that please keeping certainty for businesses and predictability that are looking to invest in our state and continue to diversify our economy as the discussion continues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brown, thank you. And you articulated something that at least Senator Boner and I are very much aware of. We both serve on the Corporations Committee, and we'll be taking up the Western Power Grid issues and all the things that you allude to. So appreciate that very much. Thanks. Any questions? Okay. Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, committee, or morning, committee. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Steph Kessler. I'm here just representing myself. I don't have a dog in this fight, but I just want to share some information with the committee that may be valuable as you look at this in the future. I want to let you know that Wyoming does have experience with such off-site mitigation funds. I know this because I served in an appointment to the Pinedale Anticline project 10 or 15 years ago. And that project had what was called the Pinedale Anticline Project Mitigation Fund of $36 million. There was a similar one created called the Jonah Interagency Mitigation Fund of $25 million. These were funds that I believe the state of Wyoming really negotiated to have put in the record of decisions of those projects, specifically to address off-site mitigation needs for those projects. Most of them were designed for wildlife mitigation, although some of the fund was used for air quality mitigation and some other things. But I just bring that up to the committee as some history and resource that might be valuable to you to look into, to see what lessons could be learned from those funds. And if you move forward with this, you know, if they could inform this conversation. Thank you.
Appreciate that very much, Ms. Kessler. Thank you. Let's keep moving along if there's no questions. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Justin Loika. I'm the Energy Program Director for the Nature Conservancies chapter in Wyoming. And like Chris pointed out, there's been a lot of great testimony already today, so I won't repeat all of those things. But I did want to draw attention to one aspect of Director Bruce's testimony, where she talked about how they're doing a fantastic job of mitigating impacts on these sites as these projects are brought to them. But one thing that can't be mitigated during the industrial siting process is where that site's located. As some of the other testimony has mentioned, these projects have invested millions in their leases, in their permitting processes by the time they arrive here and are going through this process. What this compensatory mitigation fee process would allow is a way to signal to developers where they should go on the landscape when they're coming in from out of state. So if the committee can focus any legislative changes to these mitigation fees on critical landscapes and habitat areas that would be identified by Game and Fish, that would allow developers to look ahead as they start to see this project and their projects develop and their permitting process go ahead. Before they're entering into it, they can see where they need to avoid on the landscape in order to minimize fees and reaching that certainty that other folks have talked about. So that's something we would ask you to look into.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well stated. Thank you. Any questions, committee? Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Becca Monjo. I'm here with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I'm standing in for Jess Johnson, who regrets she can't make it today due to a scheduling conflict. As you guys know, Wyoming Wildlife Federation is one of the oldest and largest sporting organizations in the state. We also do a lot in policy work. I wanted to just speak on behalf of the fact that this topic is one of the most brought up topics within the sporting community as well as within our constituents. And we believe that no development, but smart development is really important. And we're really happy to be partnering with TNC on this discussion. Wyoming has long been the gold standard for managing both wildlife and industry, and we want to continue that forward. And we just want to underscore that the importance of the Game and Fish Department here and their expertise in ensuring that mitigation strategies align with conservation efforts is invaluable. Thank you so much, and we appreciate you taking up the topic.
Thanks for being here, both of you. Appreciate it. Any questions? Okay. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to come forward and testify, knowing that we're going to continue the conversation in our next meeting? Very important stuff in the state of Wyoming these days. Once again, I want to apologize. I'm sorry that we could not get folks on streaming in. We had some technical difficulties that would have prohibited that anyway, but we would have liked to have done what we could. We've kind of reached the end of it, committee, for this morning. We've got things we got lined up to do this afternoon. So unless there's anything further, the TRW committee will be recessed for now, and we'll pick it up tomorrow morning at 8:30. So have a great afternoon. We'll see some of you this evening at the Absaroka Ranch. That's still on unless Mother Nature just opens up. Okay, so know if it's really snowing or something, we may have to call it off. Okay, we are recessed.